significant losses under the king's bombardment. This time, they would certainly learn from their mistakes, and besides, the king's artillery shells were running low, making it impossible to conduct another large-scale bombardment. Upgrading the warship quickly was essential. Otherwise, they might not be able to hold their ground. This upgrade from a level 4 to a level 5 warship required a total of 5,000 energy points and took a full 80 minutes. The warship's cargo truck form was enveloped in a milky white glow. The king closed his eyes and quietly waited. Soon, accompanied by the upgrade process, familiar system prompts sounded in the king's ears. As before, during the warship upgrade, in addition to the upgrade of the main structure, the king could also choose to load new high-tech war modules. This time, the number of modules available for selection increased from 3 to 5. As the system prompts appeared, all the selectable high-tech units floated in the king's mind, ready for selection. Chapter 155. A great crisis approaches. Your warship is about to be upgraded to level 5, and you can gain 5 high-tech module bonuses. 1. Energy shield module triggered by upgrading the area. 2. Main gun upgraded to an embedded 210mm electromagnetic catapult. Main gun. 3. Low-power electromagnetic traction device. 4. Overload electromagnetic pulse generator. 5. Heavy torpedo launch module. 6. Upgrade current anti-gravity engine. 7. Upgrade cannon to 50mm caliber. 8. Optical stealth system. 9. Basic food synthesis device. 9 out of 5. The king's heart skipped a beat. Upgrading to level 5 meant more options for new high-tech modules. Moreover, the content was richer. In addition to the weapon module options and functional module options that the king had seen before, there were now options for living modules. The food synthesis device was something the king had seen in various sci-fi films and novels, commonly found in scientific fantasies. It could automatically synthesize desired food from input materials. But undoubtedly, this device had little to do with the warship's combat and functionality. It was purely a life-supporting high-tech module. The development of the warship was comprehensive. In a doomsday environment, the king had previously chosen more combat-oriented and functional modules, but as the warship's level gradually increased and its scale expanded, various functions also appeared in the upgrade list. For the king, each upgrade was a challenging choice. 9 out of 5. The king thought, I actually want to take all 5. Meanwhile, outside the warehouse, the mutated fungal infectors launched their second wave of attack. The flames indeed posed a significant threat to them. As the fire spread, their entire offensive was delayed, forcing them to retreat and buying a considerable amount of time for the people in the royal city. However, they were quite quick in extinguishing the flames. From the mountaintop, it could be seen that under the dark sky, the large fire spots on the flat peak had already weakened, and a new round of their attacks commenced. This time, the assault on the mountain started with a volley of rocket artillery. They deployed wheeled rocket launchers and crazily fired towards the mountaintop from below. Their operation of this weapon was clearly unfamiliar, and their accuracy was poor, but the sheer firepower was overwhelming, saturating the area with explosions and rockets. The members of the action team on the mountaintop had to retreat and could not stick their heads out. Even the heavy artillery set up on the roof had to be taken down. The infected super fungus below was evidently aware that they had not yet fully mastered human weapons. The rocket strikes were merely suppressive, preventing the humans on the mountaintop from continuing to fire. Under the cover of this intense firepower, their forces quickly advanced, charging towards the mountaintop. Dong and the others knew this, but it was difficult to intercept in advance due to the severe fire suppression, leaving them to watch helplessly as the enemy approached. By the time they engaged in combat, the distorted, mutated fungal-infected beings were less than 200 meters away from the holiday resort where they were hiding. The chaotic gunfire was drowned out by the thunderous artillery. Among the infected, there were both humans and mutated creatures, howling as they charged forward. Some crawled on the ground like beasts, using both hands and feet, while others wielded firearms, firing wildly. Although their movements were uncoordinated and their aim was poor, with the recoil sending their guns skyward after a couple of shots, their sheer numbers overwhelmed the mountaintop in no time, surrounding it completely. Their makeshift outer defenses, composed of scrap vehicles and stacked furniture, had already been reduced to ruins under bombardment. In the flickering firelight, those monsters quickly closed in. Even if they were shot in the head and their bodies were torn apart, they continued to advance through the sea of flames. Some had only half a body left, yet still managed to twist and run. They had long surpassed the biological limits of humans, with the terrifying super-mutated fungus controlling their bodies. Unless their entire bodies were burned to ashes, even a single finger, with fungus growing from it, could still crawl along the ground. Some soldiers were hit by stray bullets and fell to the ground. The defense line continued to retreat. Zhang Tsongtong and others hid in the deepest part of the resort, becoming key protected targets. However, besides the military personnel desperately trying to protect them, many members of the awakened team had their own ulterior motives. If the situation continued to deteriorate, Individuals like Wang Guanghua would not hesitate to abandon Zhang Songtong and the others, seeking ways to escape on their own. However, at this moment, the situation had clearly not reached its worst. At least Hidong had not given up. He brought out the heavy artillery from the royal city, intending to fire directly, only to discover there were no shells. All that remained were ordinary ceremonial shells. Damn it, that guy has used up all the shells. Hidong angrily stomped the ground. His gaze shifted. Half of the resort was now engulfed in flames. Little did he know that what he considered ordinary cannonballs were actually high-explosive incendiary white phosphorus bombs launched by a certain city, upgraded by them. The warships and cannons provided to them were useless. Hidong was unaware of this. The burly man looked at the scene and began to imagine. Just moments ago, he didn't have time to check the ammunition, and now he realized that the cannon had run out of shells, which the individuals named Wang Chung and Xu Bing must have known all along. That's why he had hidden away before the second wave of the super fungal infected attacked, conserving strength and waiting for them to draw the monsters in, then using their vehicles to charge down the hill. Previously, when Wang Guanghua made suggestions, Hidong had his doubts about the strength of the warships from Wang Chung. Although the vehicles seemed a bit hefty, they didn't look like they could maneuver through a crowd of monsters. But now, thinking about the secret plans of Wang Chung and Xu Bing, Hidong was completely convinced. People are like that. Once suspicion arises, regardless of the truth, the more they think, the more they feel their guesses are correct, especially in such a dangerous situation. The more Hidong thought, the more he felt that Wang Chung and the others must have had a plan all along. Now, he was even starting to think about an escape route for himself. Not to mention those second-tier awakeners who were weaker than him. That Xu Bing was just as cunning as Wang Chung. At that moment, Hidong raised his head amidst the chaotic fire from the infected, and indeed couldn't he find Xu Bing anywhere. She must still be at the resort warehouse protecting Wang Chung and his vehicle. Xu Bing, being from the military, should be here protecting the valuable experts, but instead, she was off protecting Wang Chung. Wasn't she just securing her own escape route? Hidong was filled with anger, thinking that Wang Chung and Xu Bing were utterly despicable, completely forgetting that he too had been plotting for his own survival from the start. Just then, roars from the super-mutated fungal infected echoed from both front and back. The perimeter of the resort had been breached, and the outer defense line built by fearless warriors had completely collapsed. Several soldiers retreated from the front, while others rushed to bring out Zhang Chongtong and the other experts. A temporary leader among the military soldiers approached Hidong and said, "Captain He, do you have any usable plans? There are too many of them, and they are extremely hard to kill completely. We can't reach Fang Tian. And if this situation continues, by the time Fang Tian discovers our situation and comes to rescue us, we'll all be dead." Hidong clenched his teeth, throwing a Molotov cocktail forward. In the blinding flames, he temporarily halted the advancing monsters outside. The surroundings were filled with screams, and the rumbling of armored vehicles and tanks driven by the super-mutated fungi could be heard outside. They were driving poorly, with tanks even crashing into infantry fighting vehicles. However, due to the lack of manpower and firepower on their side, if a tank broke through, their fragile defense would be completely destroyed. Zhang Songtong remained calm and said, "Let's try to break through down the mountain. There's been so much commotion, it's only a matter of time before the authorities find out what's happening here. If we can break out, I need you to protect us. If we can't all escape, then so be it." Just like Zhang Songtong calmly chose to abandon others, she was equally indifferent to her own death, showing no fear. In her eyes, there was only a ranking of research value and priority. The military officer appointed by the authorities gritted his teeth and said, "We have very few military vehicles left. Captain He, your awakened ones are strong. You should take the experts with you as best as you can. My brothers and I will cover your retreat." Hidong looked at the two of them, a cold glint in his eyes, and without hesitation, he said, "Don't worry, I will do my best to protect these experts. I will take as many as I can. I know that the vehicle from Wanqing is modified and comparable to a small armored vehicle. If I requisition his vehicle, maybe we can break through." Hidong's words were laden with meaning. Doing my best to protect, taking as many as I can, meant that if they couldn't take any, then it couldn't be helped. This military officer's suggestion aligned perfectly with Hidong's desire to escape, and he naturally accepted it without hesitation, wanting these military personnel to cover him. Wang Guanghua, who was on the side, clearly understood and eagerly approached, saying, "Brother Dong, I want to join you and fight these monsters to protect the experts." Hidong shot him a cold glance and replied, "Very well. That Wanqing is hiding something, being selfish and cowardly. Now that we face a dire situation, he still won't come out. His heart is deserving of punishment. We should take him down first." Wang Guanghua was overjoyed, while Zheng Hailong behind him looked somewhat stunned, gritting his teeth and following closely. Hidong silently thought, "If it comes to that, I'll throw you out first, then the experts." At this moment, disaster had already struck. Half of the beams in the resort had collapsed, and the writhing monsters had begun to invade. The military soldiers were fully committed to blocking the rear. In their view, while Hidong and the other awakened warriors might not be as professional, their strength was extraordinary. One Hidong could match a tactical squad. If only a small unit could withdraw, letting Hidong and others protect the experts was the best choice. Hidong turned to take a glance. Monsters were surging in like a tide, overwhelming them from all sides, their frenzied howls mixed with countless pleas for surrender, hoping they would willingly become part of them. This scene was simply horrifying. Hidong, wielding a short axe in one hand and a rifle in the other, with a rocket launcher on his back, led a team of experts as they fought their way out, struggling through the wave of monsters. The situation here was dire. There was no need for Hidong to abandon anyone, as awakened warriors in their group were continuously being torn away by monsters that pounced from the darkness. Fortunately, this location is not too far from the warehouse. Hidong hurried along, fearing that Wang Chung and the others would notice something was wrong, and had already driven off in that modified truck. Those were all his belongings. However, as he got closer, Hidong realized that the warehouse door was tightly shut, and a woman named Xu Bing, an awakened one, was blocking the monster's advance at the entrance. Wang Guanghua, beside Hidong, was filled with dread and exclaimed, "Is this Xu Bing also a level 2 awakened one? She's so powerful." Not far away, Xu Bing wielded a long sword in one hand and a rifle in the other, single-handedly holding back a tide of monsters. She was even more fierce and formidable than when she was at the warehouse in High City, clearly having successfully leveled up to a level 2 awakened one at the survivor base in Fengtian. Her formidable strength took even Hidong by surprise. He realized he had underestimated this woman. Given Xu Bing's current display of skill, if the two of them faced off directly, he would have to exert quite a bit of effort. But there was no time for hesitation on the chaotic battlefield. "Follow me, experts. Don't think I won't protect you. If you die, don't blame anyone else." Hidong shouted angrily as he charged forward, sweeping his rifle and blasting apart the monsters. From a distance, he drew a tactical dagger from his waist and threw it with force. Surrounded by monsters, Hidong's target was not the monsters, but Xu Bing not far away. Although she was deep in combat, she remained alert, dodging with lightning speed. However, she was a moment too late, and the dagger pierced deeply into her calf, causing blood to flow profusely. Seeing his ambush fail, Hidong dropped the pretense and shouted, "Get moving! That truck is mine. Whoever helps me take down the truck and deal with Wang Chung, and that woman will be the one I take with me." "What are you doing?" Zhang Tsungtong, at the back, turned pale and stepped forward, trying to grab Hidong, only to be knocked to the ground by Hidong's backhand. "What do you think you're doing?" "I want to survive. Do you think I'm here to save you?" "Naive. I can't even save myself, let alone care about you and the future." A fierce expression crossed Hidong's face. "Whoever can get on the truck, the tickets are in my hands." The surrounding awakened warriors exchanged glances, all charging forward like madmen. A few remained by Zhang Tsungtong and the other experts, desperately trying to block the advancing monsters. Surrounded by monsters, Hidong could no longer afford to think too much. He strode forward, pulling out a rocket launcher from his back, ready to blow up the warehouse in front of him in one go. However, before he could fire, he saw the warehouse suddenly tremble, dust falling, and a thunderous roar echoed from within. It was as if some enormous entity was starting up with a loud crash. Hidong's steps involuntarily paused as he stared blankly at the warehouse. What is happening? Can starting the truck make such a loud noise? Chapter 156. Sorry, you don't have a ticket. At this moment, if viewed from above, the entire Pingfeng Mountain was shrouded in a dark ocean. Super fungal infections and mutated creatures are converging into a torrent, spreading towards the mountain peak. They are extremely difficult to kill, even if their flesh is torn apart. The dead fungi only control a small part of the body, while the remaining parts can still spread rapidly, controlling other remnants and continuing to move. Only high-temperature flames can quickly and massively eliminate these beings. Amidst the dark tide, there are also numerous flashes of fire and armored vehicles struggling to operate. Despite their large numbers, they still form a terrifying crushing momentum. Within the resort, the military's defensive line is precarious, hoping that the awakened warriors can safely lead the experts to break through. Little do they know that the leader has been prepared to abandon them from the very beginning, desperately fighting against the monsters. Half of the resort's buildings have already collapsed, filled with flames and death. They roared defiantly, refusing to retreat, vowing to defend their line to the last. The moment of desperation has arrived. Darkness shrouds the entire Pingfeng Mountain. Everyone will be engulfed by this darkness. This is the world of mutated fungi. Their presence is ubiquitous, covering the peaks and the earth, and no one can escape. Their voices echo in the darkness, urging, "Become a part of us. There is no need to struggle. Why suffer a painful death? We invade your minds, and the process is painless, allowing you to break free from the constraints of primitive civilization. Humanity, even if you survive, the truth of the world is something you cannot bear. Come, come. However, the military soldiers remain unmoved. The commander tightly grips his rifle and issues one last order. Remember our mission. Cover Captain He and the expert team's retreat. At all costs, fight to the last man, to the last bullet. We must not fear, we must not waver. Behind us are the lives of hundreds of thousands in the survivor base. In the darkness, a soldier lets out a terrified roar, his voice booming. Yet he does not retreat. After venting his fear, he throws himself back into the fray. They bear a heavy responsibility on their shoulders. Their hearts are devoid of fear. However, at that moment, a seismic roar erupts from the top of Pingfeng Mountain. The already crumbling resort buildings begin to collapse like a house of cards. Amidst the deafening noise, the walls crack open, and debris falls from above. The soldiers and the infected look up in surprise, unsure of what has happened. Only those outside the resort, in front of the warehouse, clearly see what has occurred. Hidong rushes to the warehouse in trance and pulls out a rocket launcher, anticipating that Wang Chung might charge out in a truck. However, he misjudges the way in which Wang Chung would emerge. Wang Chung does not come out through the main entrance. Instead, he crashes through the entire roof of the warehouse and rises up from within. The entire warehouse began to collapse, its walls crumbling like paper in several directions. The billowing smoke and dust engulfed almost the entire resort. In the corner, Shu Bing was pulling a bloody dagger out of her calf, having just slashed the throat of an awakened warrior who was trying to sneak in and kill her to curry favor with Hidong. Although the smoke obscured visibility and the darkness was heavy, she already knew what was rising from the warehouse. She simply sneered, "Did you really think that was a truck?" However, Shu Bing did not attack Hidong. Surrounded by numerous monsters, she dragged her injured leg and rushed to the side of experts like Zhang Chongtong to protect their safety. Hidong's actions filled Shu Bing with anger, but she understood the priorities of the situation. Compared to the lives of experts like Zhang Chongtong, Hidong and his group were insignificant. Zhang Chongtong looked somewhat dazed, staring blankly at the smoke. Hidong stepped back, overwhelmed by disbelief. Right before him, the smoke was illuminated by a blazing light. It was the fire from a warship's thruster, driving away the darkness and smoke, revealing the massive battleship in its entirety to everyone. At that moment, even the infected creatures that surged forward stood frozen. Looking up at this suddenly appeared behemoth overhead, with its dark, flat fuselage, streamlined structure, and enormous wingspan. The battleship had transformed from the previous fighter-like form into a true aerospace platform. The battleship was 37.6 meters long and over 50 meters wide, its lights flickering, and its armor cold and foreboding. It rose majestically from the peak of the hill, like a steel deity ascending into the sky. Then, its missile launch bay slowly emerged beneath it. 2 missiles shot into the sky, directly obliterating 2 tanks, driven by the infected, that attempted to turn their guns towards him, exploding them into fiery wreckage on the ground. At the same time, the battleship's 50mm cannons opened fire, unleashing a barrage of heavy fire on the ground. The mutated creatures near Zhang Chongtong and Shu Bing were shredded in droves. Under the terrifying firepower, those organisms controlled by the super fungus were turned into a bloody pulp. Simultaneously, laser cannons rose from the rear, firing pinpoint shots at the monsters in another direction, focusing on the infected controlled vehicles and tanks. In an instant, the battleship established fire dominance and began to move forward slowly. On the ground, even the monsters displayed expressions of shock and confusion, unable to comprehend the scene before them. The dark, cold battleship rose slowly from the warehouse, looming over the battlefield like a god of death, casting a massive shadow, and wherever it passed, all enemies were annihilated, slaughtered en masse. At that moment, it hovered above Shu Bing and the others. The rear hatch opened, and a rope ladder descended, inviting the expert team aboard the battleship. The 5th-level battleship had expanded in size, now able to accommodate these individuals. Not only did these experts manage to board the warship, but the awakened warriors who had chosen to stay back and protect the experts instead of following Hidong also boarded the ship. Shu Bing was pulled aboard as well. Soon after, the warship slowly ascended, preparing to fly towards the resort. Over there, soldiers were still fighting, and they had to pick them up. At that moment, Wang Guanghua, Hidong, and others were running towards them from the front. Hidong shouted, "Wait, I haven't boarded yet." Wang Guanghua followed closely, yelling, "There are still people who haven't boarded. Captain, he hasn't boarded." Several awakened warriors who had just tried to kill Shu Bing and Wang Chung were running and desperately shouting. At that moment, the warship paused slightly. Hidong was overjoyed, thinking the warship would stop to pick him up. Wang Guanghua had the same thought, whispering beside Hidong, "Brother Dong, although I don't know what is going on, this flying vehicle must have been created by that guy Wang Chung. Once we get on board, I'm willing to cooperate with you to take him down and seize this flying vehicle. Then you will be the hero of this operation at Pingfeng Mountain." Wang Guanghua's words stirred Hidong's heart, and a sinister smile appeared on his face as he accelerated to run forward. However, What they were met with was the rope ladder slowly being pulled up. A voice from the warship, belonging to Wang Cheng, rang out, "Sorry, I just took a look. And it seems you don't have tickets." What? This was the same taunt He Dong had thrown at Xu Bing when he thought victory was in his grasp. Now, Wang Cheng was returning the favor. The warship roared into the sky, flying far away, ruthlessly abandoning He Dong and the others. Wang Guanghua stared in disbelief at the scene before him, falling to the ground with a thud, the earlier fierceness now replaced by despair and regret. They had abandoned others. And now, others had abandoned them. He Dong was momentarily stunned, but a fierce and resentful expression emerged on his face. He raised a rocket launcher towards the sky and roared, "Do you want me to die? If I die, none of you will be able to escape. I will send you all to your doom." Veins bulged on He Dong's face, his eyes bloodshot, clearly driven mad. He fired, intending to take Wang Cheng and the others down with him. The rocket soared into the sky. At such a close distance, there was no chance of missing. It hit directly. A distorted smile spread across He Dong's face, and behind him, Wang Guanghua laughed. "Good shot. Good shot. Let them all die. Let them all die. No one should survive." However, the next moment, their expressions froze. The anticipated scene of destruction did not occur. The rocket failed to hit the flying vehicle and instead collided with a shield-like barrier surrounding it, exploding with a loud bang. Amidst the flames, the flying vehicle remained unscathed and zipped away. As the fire extinguished, the shield vanished in an instant. At the moment the shield appeared, a large number of super-fungal infected individuals looked up in shock, watching the warship fly past. In the microscopic world of super-fungi, information was rapidly spreading in an unbelievable manner. They were not mistaken. Energy shield system? How could humanity possibly have such technology? Where did this spacecraft come from? Is it a full ship shield or localized shields? Continue the fire test. Shoot it down, shoot it down. Meanwhile, nearby, He Dong and Wang Guanghua and others have found themselves in a desperate situation. Countless monsters surging in from all directions, pulling at their bodies, with mycelium spreading along their muscles and skin. The tide of darkness completely engulfs them. Chapter 157. Those who block me shall die. Inside the warship, there is a deathly silence. Zhang Chongtong and the team of experts, along with the awakened ones, are astonished as they look around the narrow cabin of the warship. A researcher even raises a hand to touch the surroundings. Could this Pingfeng Mountain be some sort of military base? How did such a massive object appear? And how did it take off vertically? Was that just now a laser cannon weapon? The same doubts and shock linger in everyone's minds, even surpassing the joy of surviving. Zhang Chongtong's face is filled with disbelief. She too cannot comprehend where such a colossal thing came from. The existence of a secret military base under Pingfeng Mountain seems to be the only explanation. But can the current electromagnetic catapult assist such a large aircraft in vertical takeoff? Moreover, if there is indeed a hidden military base within the mountain structure, how did Wang Cheng know about it? Is Wang Cheng's rank higher than theirs? Zhang Chongtong cannot help but look at Xu Bing, asking, "What rank are you in Wang Cheng? You're definitely not ordinary people. You're the backup that the commander has placed in the team, right?" Xu Bing's question draws everyone's attention. Throughout their journey, Wang Cheng and Xu Bing have appeared quite ordinary, just inconspicuous figures in the team. However, who would have thought that at this moment? It is this seemingly insignificant person who directly launches an aircraft to sweep across Pingfeng Mountain. The contrast is simply jaw-dropping. At this time, Xu Bing is tearing off a piece of her clothing to bandage her injured calf, glancing towards the cockpit. She knows there is no hidden military base within the mountain-ash structure. They are not some backup. And even the commander does not trust her and Wang Cheng that much. This aircraft is simply Wang Cheng's little transport vehicle. However, Xu Bing is equally surprised. This time, it is clearly different from the last time she saw it. It is larger and more powerful. In her memory, the last time she rode in Wang Cheng's transforming aircraft, the interior did not have a distinct cabin structure. It was just a fighter jet shell with several seats, essentially the fuselage and cockpit of a fighter jet. But now, the cockpit is at the front, separated by a heavy protective door, and their current position is within a narrow structure of the aircraft cabin. The size and capability have increased geometrically. However, now is clearly not the time to delve into this. As Wang Cheng's warship ascends, the super-mutated fungi on Pingfeng Mountain are also boiling with activity. They began to unleash their firepower recklessly. At the hillside position, they activated the missile launch system obtained from humans. Although they had not yet mastered it fully and their aim was quite poor, they still fired wildly into the sky. At this moment, the command ship moved above the resort, lowered a rope ladder, and brought up the military personnel who were still resisting below. Once they were aboard the warship, it became somewhat crowded. Similarly, these soldiers looked equally bewildered. They exchanged glances, no one spoke, but their faces clearly displayed countless questions. Where did this aircraft come from? What was happening? Everyone on the warship was in a state of confusion. However, at this time, The commander was too overwhelmed to even feel joy at upgrading to a 5th-level warship. He was frantically dealing with assaults from all sides. The entire area was firing at him. The rear cabin of the warship was semi-enclosed, with space limitations and no portholes, so those inside could not see the outside situation. Otherwise, they would have been terrified by what was happening. The super-mutated fungi were indeed a serious threat. Half of the resort had collapsed. Flames were burning on the ground, and a horrifying scene unfolded as a large number of infected creatures gathered frantically. They piled up like mountains, and amidst the blood, countless fine fungal threads stacked up, transforming on the ground into a terrifyingly large pale hand that desperately tried to pull the commander's warship down from the sky. The commander merely chuckled coldly. What a joke! Flesh and blood dared to collide with a warship? These microbial monsters were indeed terrifying, but on the battlefield, the warship was far more ruthless. The commander directly launched 2 missiles. One struck the monstrous hand made of fungal threads, while the other hit the blood mound below that supplied nutrients for its growth, explosively severing it in the fiery light. Meanwhile, on the mountainside, a barrage of missiles and shells rose up, firing intensely at the commander's warship. Most of the ammunition once held by the coastal military had been seized by the current super fungi, launching a frenzied attack from the hillside, creating a dense firepower net aimed at bringing down the commander's warship from the sky. In response to this assault, the commander plunged straight into the fray, launching a barrage of missiles and sweeping with laser cannons, directly penetrating the hillside. With concentrated fire from 50mm rounds, he targeted any location that dared to shoot at him. His warship was hit by several missiles, shaking violently, but did not sustain any substantial damage, as the ship's shield responded in time, intercepting most of the incoming fire. The commander's warship swept through the air, and he even discovered a bizarre weapon seemingly unique to the super-mutated fungi. It emerged from the dark forest, covered in fungal threads, writhing like a living creature. Its dark cannon mouth resembled a giant creature's maw, launching a large mass of unknown strong acid substances directly towards the commander's warship. Strangely, his energy shield did not respond to this projectile. Wang Cheng's battleship upgraded from a level 4 to a level 5, enhancing its shield once again. The level 5 battleship's area triggered an energy shield, which would automatically activate to intercept attacks if it detected any dangerous strikes. If there was no response, it meant that the weapon had evaded the recognition of the intelligent assistance system. However, these super-mutated fungi could not possibly create something that was not a weapon to attack him. Realizing this, Wang Cheng did not dare to be careless. He urgently evaded, swiftly dodging the incoming projectile. The image captured by the battleship's intelligent assistance system was magnified infinitely, revealing that this object was composed of some bizarre pale flesh-like worms, coalescing into a mass, wriggling together to form a gigantic projectile. He had no idea what would happen if it hit him. Clearly, this was a type of special weapon from the super-mutated fungi. As the first similar weapon was launched, more bizarre biological artillery emerged from the dark mountains and forests, firing madly at Wang Cheng. On the ground, more infected individuals surged forward, some firing weapons at the sky, while others, like the enormous hand moments ago, continued to grow and twist, using their flesh and blood bodies to reach the sky, attempting to drag Wang Cheng's battleship down from the heavens. At this moment, the power they exhibited seemed to be the true military might of these super-mutated fungi. Previously, they had not wanted to reveal too much, trying to hide their strength and secrets. But now, realizing the situation was out of control, they revealed their trump card, desperately trying to intercept and destroy Wang Cheng in the air. It was as if the entire Pingfeng mountain had come to life, shaking violently, as if a giant from the mountains was resurrecting. At that moment, Wang Cheng's radar showed that the whole Pingfeng mountain was a massive heat source. With these terrifying super fungi spread throughout the mountain, the entire mountain was trembling, cracking, with pale fungi spreading through the exposed fissures. They had not only infected the creatures above and below the mountain, but had also embedded their roots into the peaks, spreading from top to bottom, inside and out. Everywhere was their structure, infiltrating the entire Pingfeng mountain. What seemed to be inorganic rocks and soil had long been covered by these super fungi. They had infected the mountain to the point of becoming part of it, just like they did with living organisms. No wonder they had not rushed to attack the mountain before. The entire Pingfeng mountain was already part of them. They could not only affect organic matter, but could also consume inorganic materials. Yet, they did not expect that humanity, which should have been trapped, could actually sprout wings and fly. Now, they had no choice but to mobilize the entire mountain, causing the ground to crack open and revealing the eerie, terrifying flesh-like fungal artillery, launching those wriggling worm projectiles into the sky. Pingfeng Mountain had long since transformed into a war fortress for these fungi. At this moment, it was becoming a terrifying artillery platform, with countless flesh and fungal tubes protruding from the mountain structure, firing wildly at Wang Cheng. On the ground, numerous human-infected individuals were frantically running, firing their weapons aimlessly. A terrifying interception line formed before the royal city. The chaos was relentless, showcasing the formidable combat power of these terrifying supermutated fungi and their determination to seize the royal city. The firepower network was densely intertwined, locking down the airspace above the mountain. Behind this was the confidence and arrogance of these creatures. They had turned the peaks into fortresses for land warfare, fully unleashing their firepower, believing they could take down the royal city, an aerial battleship. Amidst the concentrated fire, the battleship of the royal city was struck by a fleshworm shell, causing the creatures to explode into a mass of corrosive acid that directly penetrated the royal city's strong alloy armor. Moreover, those creatures could still move in the strong acid, crazily advancing into the depths of the royal city's battleship, detonating like remote-controlled bombs, with the acid corroding and triggering alarms constantly. It was as if monstrous insects had burrowed into the human body, wreaking havoc on the battleship's internal structure. Alarms went off repeatedly inside the battleship. There was no time to linger. They had to break out of the encirclement quickly and leave the vicinity of the mountain. The royal city immediately switched to manual control of the energy shield, actively intercepting. Being hit by 1 or 2 shells was manageable, but if struck by multiple fleshworm shells, the battleship would be completely dismantled. At that moment, he was equally terrified. He never expected the situation at the mountain to escalate to this level. If he were still on a level 4 battleship, forcing his way through the sky would likely result in being intercepted by this firepower network and shot down. Moreover, he Dong and the others had no chance of escaping on their own. However, at this moment, the royal city was a level 5 battleship, with performance and firepower significantly upgraded. The royal city pushed the joystick all the way down, the battleship accelerating wildly, its thrusters spewing scorching flames. At the same time, 50mm cannons and dual missile launchers opened fire without restraint, and the hatches below the battleship slowly opened. Torpedo launch module activated. 300 energy points deducted. Large torpedo incendiary printing in progress. Target locked on mountain. Launch countdown. Below the battleship, torpedoes were launched. These space war torpedoes were incredibly fast, shooting through the biological artillery shell blockade formed by the super fungi below, striking the mountain. In an instant, the entire peak shook violently. Flames soared into the sky, engulfing the front of the mountain. This shot from the royal city almost blasted apart a section of the mountain, with flames sweeping along the mountainside, swallowing countless infected individuals and flesh artillery within. Even if the entire peak was a cannon platform, I would still blow it open. The firepower interception network was instantly blasted open with a massive gap. As the level 5 battleship fired wildly, it surged forward. Amidst the horrified gazes of the supermutated fungi-infected individuals, he charged through the blockade of the mountain, leaving a trail of fire behind him, cutting through the chaos. All obstacles in front of him became souls consumed by flames and explosions. Those who stood in the way of the battleship were doomed. Chapter 158. The power of synthetic beef. The body of the ship shook violently, and the faces of the people inside the warship showed signs of panic. Yet, just a door away, no one knew what had happened. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief, mixed with the joy of having survived a crisis. All they could infer was from the vibrations of the ship and the booming sounds coming from outside, indicating that a fierce battle was underway. Zhang Tsongtong whispered, "It seems these fungal creatures haven't used all their means against us." A military soldier stepped forward, wanting to enter the cockpit, but was blocked by Xu Bing. This woman was steadfast in her commitment to the warship. The soldier paused for a moment but said nothing, silently turning back. Gradually, the shaking and the loud noises began to subside, and the flight of the warship became stable. The towering Pingfeng Mountain was slowly left behind. In the view, the mountain was ablaze with fire. The entire peak seemed to move like a giant rock creature. However, the warship had accelerated to a certain speed, rapidly leaving the strike range of Pingfeng Mountain. A heavy torpedo incendiary bomb dropped, igniting half the mountain and halting the offensive of those fungal creatures, allowing the warship to completely distance itself and vanish into the vast dark night. Inside the cockpit, Wang Qing finally let out a sigh of relief. With his dual-level awakened abilities, he almost collapsed into the pilot's seat. The recent series of maneuvers had been exhausting. As the warship reached level 5, its size and functionalities expanded significantly, making manual control increasingly challenging. Although the Intelligent Auxiliary System's fire control module could assist Wang Qing in firing to some extent, the intelligence level of the level 5 warship was clearly not at that standard, leading to moments of inefficiency. For instance, just moments ago, the intelligence system failed to assess the power of the fungal artillery, requiring Wang Qing to manually switch controls. At that time, he was managing 7 or 8 tasks simultaneously. truly multitasking while also aiming and firing the laser cannons, missile launchers, torpedo launchers, and machine guns. In less than 10 minutes of fierce fighting, he felt as if he had been battling for 3 days and nights, drenched in sweat and overwhelmed. Having broken through from Pingfeng Mountain, he didn't even have time to check on the situation of those he had rescued. He just needed to rest for a moment. At this moment, though he felt exhausted, Wang Chung remained focused on the radar and the ship's display screens, ready to respond immediately if anything happened. Only then did he have the chance to assess his level 5 warship, compared to the 4th level battleship. The 5th level battleship has undergone significant changes with an expenditure of 5,000 energy points. The battleship itself now includes an additional aft cabin, which is currently where Xu Bing and others are located. Although it is still quite cramped, it is a vast improvement compared to the prototype in the 4th level state. Additionally, there are 5 optional advanced technology modules, and the leader chose to upgrade the shield, machine gun, main gun, torpedo generator, and food synthesis device. Inside the battleship, the cockpit and the aft cabin have been separated, transforming from the previous fighter jet cockpit layout to 5 distinct seats, resembling the initial form of a bridge. The tonnage and volume of the battleship have increased correspondingly, along with upgrades to the intelligent assistance system, radar, and other conventional components. The outer alloy armor plates have also been comprehensively enhanced. If not for the continuous increase in the battleship's size, the improved defensive and resilience capabilities would have been insufficient to withstand the heavy artillery from the previous encounter, which could have penetrated through to the interior. Just one shot could have brought down the leader's battleship. The increase in size brings numerous benefits. Observing the changes in the battleship and the empty 4 seats in the cockpit, along with the recent chaos, the leader suddenly had an idea. As the battleship's upgraded functions multiply and the bridge model takes shape, he realized he could begin selecting a crew for his battleship's bridge. This way, he wouldn't have to serve as the captain, pilot, gunner, and observer all at once. Adding personnel is essential, as the leader believes that the next battleship upgrade will undoubtedly result in an even larger size and more functions. Even with the assistance system, he won't be able to manage everything alone, especially since the next upgrade requires a full 10,000 energy points. This is a considerable amount, but it also means that such an upgrade will elevate the battleship to a new level. After flying for a while, the leader's battleship gradually slowed down. The alarm continued to sound, indicating that there were still parasites crawling on the battleship's armor. To prevent further damage, he confirmed the withdrawal from the danger zone and descended to a relatively safe observation point in the air, where there were no mutated creatures around. After pushing open the cockpit door, the leader made his way to the back and noticed that a group of military personnel, awakeners, and researchers were all looking at him with strange expressions. The temporary leader appointed by the military was still alive and quietly asked, "Is this also part of Vice's arrangements, Mr. Wang?" The leader paused slightly, noticing all eyes on him. He smiled and replied, "You can interpret it that way. However, I must remind you that this is my aircraft, not under military control. Without my unlocking permissions, no one can operate it, and I cannot hand it over to anyone outside of myself and my trusted personnel." The person in charge was momentarily taken aback, sensing the underlying meaning in Wang Cheng's words, but more than that, he was surprised. He looked around, his face revealing astonishment and curiosity. However, he knew that without Wang Cheng's intervention, they would have long been dead on Pingfeng Mountain. At this moment, he had no intention of opposing Wang Cheng, and said, "I understand your point. This isn't something I should involve myself in, but once we reach the capital, the higher-ups will likely want to inquire further. We appreciate your help. Without you, we might have perished on Pingfeng Mountain." He had already heard from others about Hidong's situation and realized that he had entrusted the wrong person. Thus, although the temporary leader harbored doubts, he didn't want to ask too many questions to avoid unnecessary conflict with Wang Cheng. At such a time, they still needed to rely on him, and it was best to maintain politeness and distance without knowing Wang Cheng's specific situation. Wang Cheng noticed the caution of the military personnel and nodded slowly. His gaze shifted and landed on the wound on Xu Bing's calf, but he said nothing. The others stepped aside, perhaps due to the intimidating presence of Wang Cheng's warship, or perhaps because he had just ruthlessly abandoned Hidong and others, instilling a sense of fear in them. Even Zhang Chantong and other previously fearless researchers now glanced at Wang Cheng with evasion, clearly having learned a vivid lesson from Hidong's fate. However, Wang Cheng didn't mind. If they were afraid, so be it. He opened the hatch and let everyone disembark from the warship, following suit. Among the crowd, Zheng Hailong approached nervously, rubbing his hands together, and said, "Brother Wang Cheng, I want to clarify something. I'm not familiar with Hidong or Wang Guanghua. Their matters have nothing to do with me." He was very frightened. Previously, he had only seen Wang Cheng as a powerful awakened individual with a background in the research center. But after witnessing Wang Cheng conjure such a massive flying vehicle during the Pingfeng Mountain expedition, he felt both amazed and terrified. He was anxious. worried that his previous closeness to Hidong and Wang Guanghua would cause Wang Cheng to harbor resentment against him. After all, Hidong had been outright abandoned by Wang Cheng. It was as if Wang Cheng hadn't heard him as he walked towards the wing section. He observed closely and found that the corrosion was indeed severe. As a biological weapon, the fleshworm projectile, upon impact, would cause the outermost layer of fleshworms to burst first, releasing strong acidic pus that corroded through the outer deck. The remaining fleshworms thrived in the acid and began crawling through the gaps in the armored structure towards the interior of the warship, continuously exploding and causing multiple damages. If Wang Cheng's warship had not been larger than before, a single projectile would have been enough to corrode through the entire vessel. Nonetheless, there were still fleshworms crawling inside, akin to leeches burrowing into the human body, traversing through the warship and feeding on flesh and blood. Fortunately, their movement was slow, and the outer armor of Wang Cheng's warship was tight, leaving only one or two still alive. Wang Cheng directly drew a titanium alloy dagger from his waist and dispatched the two remaining ones. They burst at the tip of the knife, as strong acid directly corroded the titanium alloy dagger, causing Zheng Hailong to step back repeatedly. Wang Cheng then turned his head, glanced at Zheng Hailong, and said, "I know. Don't worry." Zheng Hailong finally let out a long sigh of relief. Looking at Wang Cheng, he deeply felt that Wang Guanghua was simply a big fool. How could someone like him have entered the research center and gained high-level attention purely by luck? That was true strength. He simply said, "Brother, thank you. I still have many family members to take care of back in Fengtian. If I really die here, I don't know what they would do. I admit I have made mistakes in the past, but not today. In the future, if you need anything, I will definitely help." On the other side, the military had briefly set up a campfire, gathering around it to warm themselves and tend to their injuries. The researchers were moving Li Xinqing down and checking his condition. Meanwhile, Zhang Tsongtong sat quietly on the side, gazing in the direction of Pingfeng Mountain, lost in thought. Wang Cheng looked at Zheng Hailong, just smiled and shook his head, then made his way onto the warship. At this moment, the warship was empty. Wang Cheng went to a corner of the rear cabin and activated a device that resembled a small vending machine. This was none other than the Life-type black technology product he had chosen for the upgraded Level 5 warship, a food synthesizer. The operation of this device was quite simple. By inputting materials, it could synthesize other foods based on their nutritional content or directly produce cooked dishes. For example, if he put in a pile of protein, it could generate beef, which could be either raw or a cooked steak or cumin beef. Additionally, as a product of the system, by using energy points, he could directly print the food he wanted with this synthesizer. Costing 3 energy points, give me 3 pounds of beef. Wang Cheng found a large basin. Input the energy points, and soon, 3 large pieces of fresh beef were synthesized. He then carried this basin of beef outside. Outside, he set up an iron basin containing the 3 pounds of beef over the campfire. Adding mineral water and a bit of refined salt and monosodium glutamate that someone had packed on the warship for him, he began to boil the beef. Initially, Wang Cheng sat down, and besides Xu Bing, everyone kept their distance, even the military personnel cautiously sitting far away. They had been saved by Wang Cheng, but were also wary of him. However, as the beef started to boil and the aroma wafted through the air, everyone's eyes unconsciously shifted over, and they began to swallow their saliva. It had been over a month since the apocalypse began, and cattle had mutated. Beef had become extremely precious. Aside from those at the top, very few people could enjoy it. Seeing Wang Cheng directly boil 3 pounds of beef was simply irresistible. Even Xu Bing, who was tending to wounds, looked up to glance over. On the other side, Zhang Tsongtong, seemingly stimulated by Hidong and others, could not hold back either, staring intently at the bubbling beef, while only a few were left pondering where this beef had come from. Wang Cheng, however, felt a sense of awe. The power of synthesized beef was simply tremendous. The aloof experts, the indifferent Xu Bing, and even the other awakened warriors and military personnel who were somewhat wary of themselves were all drawn to the aroma of the beef, unconsciously moving closer. In the past, those with money, cars, houses, power, and influence were the ones in demand. Now, whoever has beef is the one in demand. Chapter 159. Are you also an awakened one? The enticing meat aroma wafted through the air. The texture of synthetic beef still had its differences from fresh beef, but in such an era, this was already quite remarkable. The pervasive meat scent nearly left everyone present in a daze. The military personnel, the awakened warriors, and even Zhang Chongtong looked at Wang Cheng with a changed expression. Who exactly is this Wang Cheng? Previously, he had brought out a heavy artillery piece, followed by a massive aircraft. Now he presented a pot full of beef. Zhang Chongtong had reviewed Wang Cheng's information, which indicated that he was just an ordinary survivor who had come from Haiqing to Fengtian. And he was only treated a bit better because he was associated with the research center and Professor Chen. However, everything unfolding before them was overturning their understanding of Wang Cheng. This seemingly ordinary member of the team was far from what they had imagined. On their way here, these individuals had barely spoken with Wang Cheng and Xu Bing, except for LV Fong, who had initiated a conversation. The others had shown little interest in engaging with Wang Cheng and the others, as even if they wanted to curry favor, there were awakened warriors in the team. And even important figures from the research center wouldn't bother with an ordinary person like Wang Cheng. Now, the facts prove that Wang Cheng was certainly not an ordinary individual. Even those military personnel, who were not so snobbish, hadn't anticipated that in a moment of crisis, it would be Wang Cheng piloting the aircraft to rescue them all from Pingfeng Mountain. Although the temporary military leader did not show much on the surface, internally, he was filled with disbelief. How could an ordinary secondary awakened one, who had shown no remarkable traits along the way, suddenly transform into someone they all relied upon? As a result, the military personnel began to harbor some doubts and apprehensions toward Wang Cheng, but due to the current special circumstances, they did not dare to dig deeper. Just then, as Wang Cheng started cooking the beef, everyone forgot their doubts and astonishment. A few young soldiers even forgot to remain vigilant, instinctively leaning forward to focus on the pot of beef. Zhang Chongtong couldn't help but move closer as well. No matter who you are, you have to bow down in the presence of beef. After just experiencing a fierce battle, everyone was severely drained of energy, and at this moment, the pot of beef smelled utterly divine. A young female researcher from the research center even swallowed hard and said, "Where did you get this beef? It smells amazing. I got it from a friend at the Fengtian survivor base. It was sealed, and I didn't expect it to still be good," Wang Cheng replied with a smile, noticing that even the usually cold Xu Bing had glanced over several times. At this moment, the beef was finally cooked. Wang Cheng took out a small bowl he had prepared earlier and filled it with a large serving. Everyone's gaze fell upon the bowl of broth and the big chunks of beef inside. However, everyone knew that such a precious dish would definitely be consumed by Wang Cheng first. Whether the rest could be shared with everyone depended on his mood. Suddenly, Xu Bing looked up in confusion. Wang Cheng had placed the first bowl of beef in front of her. She was surprised and lifted her head. The people around them were also taken aback. "Thank you," she said. Wang Cheng just smiled and pushed it slightly forward. He wasn't hungry. He had specifically made this bowl of synthetic beef, not for himself. Seeing that Xu Bing had an injury on her leg, which wasn't serious, he wanted to prepare this pot of beef to help her recover. Wang Cheng was always clear about such matters. Xu Bing had helped him guard the warehouse before, and regardless of whether her intention was to help him or to assist others, she deserved this. Realizing this, Xu Bing did not refuse but silently accepted the bowl. Rarely, she made a playful remark, "I almost forgot what beef tastes like." Then her tone turned serious as she quietly added, "Let us be clear, your matters are one thing, but I promise to watch over you before entering the survivor base. I will not forget my mission. I will keep an eye on you for the sake of the base. If you pose a threat to the experts or to the base, I'll be the first to pull my gun and take you out." Xu Bing's voice wasn't loud, but her tone was icy. Wang Cheng believed that this cold military girl was not joking. However, he wasn't angry. The relationship between him and Xu Bing had always been subtle. He simply smiled and said, "All right, but you look quite cute when drinking soup." Xu Bing raised her head, her short hair fluttering, and shot him a glare. Then Wang Cheng served a second bowl to the anxious Zheng Hailong. Zheng Hailong was stunned, never expecting this. He stared blankly at Wang Cheng, a man in his 40s. His eyes reddening, not from emotion, but from shame. He recalled that he had secretly harbored similar thoughts as Wang Guanghua and even spoken ill of Wang Cheng. Wang Cheng just smiled and said nothing, turning his head and addressing everyone. "You've all worked hard. Let us share this together. Don't worry, there are no fungi in here. I'm not someone who would harm you. I brought you out, and I have no intention of doing anything against you. I will ensure your safe return to the survivor base, where I also have family and friends. Deep down, I hope everyone can return safely and report back on this situation in full. But I must remind you that from this moment on, our identities have changed. I am no longer just a regular member of the team. Instead, I expect all of you to follow my lead until we reach the survivor base." Wang Cheng didn't want these people to fear him or maintain a rigid relationship. Thus, seeing their longing for the beef, he decided to go with the flow, using this gesture to ease the relationship with everyone. The aroma of meat was too enticing, and as Wang Cheng finished speaking, the awakened warriors and researchers could no longer contain themselves and gathered around. The military personnel were also eager, their eyes glinting with desire. But they maintained discipline and did not move. It was not until the temporarily appointed leader stood up, shook hands with Wang Cheng, and said, "Thank you for your contributions. We are willing to cooperate with you," that the atmosphere shifted. Xu Bing quietly raised her head and glanced at Wang Cheng, sensing a change. Compared to when he first entered the survivor base, Wang Cheng seemed different now. Previously, he had been reserved, but at this moment, his pride and strength were almost palpable. She had a premonition. This time returning to the survivor base, Wang Chung would likely no longer hide himself as he had before, but would instead boldly showcase his power and negotiate with the military and the entire survivor community. People began to divide the beef soup, creating a lively scene that contrasted sharply with the death and despair that had preceded it, revealing a sense of joy in survival. Wang Cheng's gaze shifted to Zhang Tsongtong. He wanted to find an opportunity to have a proper conversation with her. However, this brief moment of calm joy was interrupted when a researcher rushed over, reporting that Li Xinqing's condition had worsened. Zhang Tsongtong and Wang Cheng immediately stood up and moved closer. Li Xinqing's situation was indeed dire. His wounds had stopped bleeding, but the fungal mycelium had deeply invaded his internal organs and continued to grow, making it difficult to eradicate. He had also just regained consciousness. Moments ago, his body had suddenly begun to convulse violently, frightening the surrounding researchers. Zhang Tsongtong rushed over, directing the researchers to stabilize Li Xinqing's convulsing body and quickly administered a medication. His condition improved slightly, and the convulsions ceased. Standing up, Zhang Tsongtong glanced at Wang Cheng and explained, "Perhaps the fungal infection has started to invade the brain. These fungi have a terrifying penetrating ability. Although they require a sufficient quantity to form a neural network similar to human intelligence and cognitive ability. Each individual fungus is a resilient life form at the microscopic level. They infiltrate the brain from a microscopic perspective, making it impossible to clearly assess the infection's status and progression." Zhang Tsongtong's attitude towards Wang Cheng had noticeably changed, now exhibiting a degree of politeness. This was not just about a pot of beef. It was a lesson learned from what had happened to Hidong. That painful slap was her tuition. Being so young yet already a professor in her field, her mind was sharp and agile. She thought more deeply about Wang Cheng than others did and had a more profound judgment. Therefore, she paused slightly and said, "That aircraft of yours. It's not from a military base within Pingfeng Mountain, is it? It's your vehicle." Wang Cheng was taken aback. The military and the awakened warriors all believed that the aircraft in the royal city came from a secret military base beneath the unknown Peak Mountain. However, at this moment, Zhang Tsongtong had already figured it out. Yet, Wang Cheng did not respond directly to Zhang Tsongtong's question, only hinting, "This is a dangerous question." Zhang Tsongtong's gaze flickered for a moment, and she said, "I don't mean to test you. I just want to understand the specific situation of Peak Mountain." There was a significant commotion during the breakout. What exactly happened? Wang Cheng understood Zhang Tsongtong's intent. Her words were indeed not a test, but a clear statement. "I realize you were pretending to be weak, and you have secrets, depth, and strength. I want to be polite and establish a connection with you." This was a proactive gesture of goodwill. Upon hearing this, Wang Cheng couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth. It turned out that Zhang Tsongtong had indeed been provoked by Hidong. Previously, she looked down on everyone, but now she was directly trying to build a relationship with a strong person. Zhang Tsongtong was truly clear-headed. After facing setbacks, she could swiftly change her approach, which surprised Wang Cheng. A professor, after all, was no fool. However, this was precisely what Wang Cheng wanted. He had many questions about these fungi, and even if Zhang Tsongtong hadn't asked, he had planned to share information with this expert. Zhang Tsongtong's willingness to cooperate and show goodwill was indeed favorable. Wang Cheng couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. In the research center, Zhang Tsongtong and Professor Chun were of equal status, known for their academic contributions, and were truly significant figures. Yi and Shan treated them with great respect, protecting them as treasures. That was why Zhang Tsongtong had such high standards. Previously, Wang Cheng had used various means to build a relationship with Professor Zhang, but now she had come to him willingly. However, before Wang Cheng could voice his response, not far from them, Li Xinqing, who had been unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. His pupils were grayish-white, staring intently at Wang Cheng, startling everyone. In a hoarse voice, he said, "You are also a reviver?" Chapter 160. Not simple. The surrounding researchers quickly stood up and stepped back, while Shubbing and the military personnel almost immediately drew their guns. It was clear to everyone that the Li Xinqing who had regained consciousness was no longer human. His grayish-white eyes were hollow, and his voice was raspy, resembling those infected individuals they had seen on Peak Mountain. Zhang Tsongtong's gaze fell on Wang Cheng, flickering for a moment, seemingly triggered by Li Xinqing's words. She whispered, "It seems our blocking agents have failed. They have already invaded his brain." However, Wang Cheng was fixated on Li Xinqing, asking in return, "Reviver? What is a reviver? Are you revivers?" Li Xinqing stared intently at Wang Cheng, the fungal filaments on his face slowly writhing and growing. "Which civilization do you come from? From which era's civilization? What is your civilization's serial number? Will you stand with humanity? They are merely the fortunate ones of their time. Associating with them is like digging your own grave. Has your civilization already dwindled to such a state?" Li Xinqing seemed to have not heard Wang Cheng's question and threw out a whole bunch of inquiries instead. Moreover, it completely ignored the surrounding humans, its gaze solely fixed on Wang Cheng. and its words were directed entirely at him. However, these statements left everyone astonished, their eyes darting between Wang Cheng and Li Xinqing. Xu Bing's pupils also rarely displayed a look of doubt and shock as she involuntarily glanced at the aircraft of Wang Cheng parked not far away. In the scene, Wang Cheng was similarly filled with countless questions. The other party had clearly misunderstood something. Yet, this was not a bad thing. The infected individuals he had encountered before had said many things, but none conveyed any crucial or important information. Until this moment, Li Xinqing had mistaken itself for some kind of reviver, which was why it shared so much information. This was because it wanted to obtain information it mistakenly believed Wang Cheng possessed. Realizing this, Wang Cheng took a deep breath. He neither denied nor affirmed the other party's identification, but instead half-agreed with its statements, saying, "I don't understand your meaning. Since I am standing here, I am on the side of humanity. You are also revivers. Which side you choose to stand on is not my concern, and my matters are not yours to manage." Wang Cheng's words captured the essence and heritage of the language and culture of his civilization. Although it seemed he said a lot, in reality, it was all empty talk, offering no useful information. At that moment, the fungal organism within the infected Li Xinqing clearly lacked experience in dealing with such unnutritious content. It seemed to interpret some information it believed it understood from Wang Cheng's words, and immediately responded, "I understand now. Your civilization has declined. Though I do not know which sequence of civilization you come from, your civilization must be impressive. However, your individual members are now few, and you alone cannot contend with a civilization. Your choice is wrong. In the new era, only truly powerful civilizations can survive. Humanity is not your choice. If you are willing, we are open to your arrival. Return to Pingfeng Mountain. We will grant you and your civilization enough respect. Human civilization will ultimately be replaced by us. All will perish. The survivor base in Fengtian has already become a human island in this region. Seeking them out is a desperate struggle. We hope you will make a wise decision." Wang Cheng was taken aback by these words. How did it understand? Understand what? However, Li Xinqing's statements completely confirmed Wang Cheng's suspicions. The revivers were indeed ancient civilizations that had awakened. These superfungi were not newly emerged intelligent beings born from apocalyptic mutations, but rather remnants of an ancient civilization that had quietly awakened in the darkness. To say nothing of the dense mycelium covering the mountains and the terrifying biological artillery, these could not have been created by newly emerged intelligent beings. The firing rate and capabilities of that artillery were already comparable to human gunpowder weapons, showcasing the technology accumulated over time and civilization history. For many years, humanity has looked up at the starry sky, unaware that the civilizations they sought were right beneath their feet, coldly observing them. Now, they emerge from the depths, revived. Did they mistake their aircraft for the products of another civilization? If what the infected individual, Li Xinqing, said is true, the Earth has experienced multiple eras and countless civilizations, even possessing a sequence of civilizations. At that moment, another gasp echoed through the crowd. After Li Xinqing finished speaking, his body suddenly began to convulse, frothing at the mouth, and the fungi on him fell off in large numbers, dying. Zhang Chongtong exclaimed softly, "They are committing suicide. Damn it, they don't want to leave their living specimens for us to study. Quick, see if we can stop them, force these fungi into dormancy, and prevent their suicide process." The researchers, including Zhang Chongtong, quickly became busy, while Wang Cheng turned around to find everyone looking at him with a strange expression, as if they were earthlings gazing at aliens. On the other side, the efforts of Zhang Chongtong and the others ultimately ended in failure. They could not stop the mass suicide of the fungi. Dejected, they stood up, realizing that not only had the fungi on Li Xinqing died, but all the samples they had previously collected had also perished. One researcher whispered, "The neural networks they form consist of neurons, each being an independent entity. The neural network makes judgments, and the signals from the neurons can spread at the speed of light, commanding each microscopic fungal individual to commit suicide. We simply cannot stop it. However, it seems they have some special method of signal transmission. Otherwise, how did the living fungal samples we collected also die?" Another researcher added. "But just now, they didn't commit suicide. Why the sudden change?" He paused, his gaze involuntarily shifting to Wang Cheng. The only change from before was the recent conversation. The answer seemed to emerge. The super fungi regarded Wang Cheng as the reviver, thus they did not want their living samples to fall into his hands. If this is true, it reflects a contempt for human civilization. So, the living samples of the super fungi we collected could have committed suicide long ago to prevent our research, but why didn't they? Do they have some kind of conspiracy? The analysis from another researcher sent a chill through everyone. They had thought the super fungi samples they collected were under their control, but now it seemed they were mistaken. At that moment, Wang Cheng had already stepped through the crowd, arriving in front of Li Xinqing, slowly taking his hand. Li Xinqing was on the brink of death, his consciousness hazy and breathing weak. Wang Qing wanted to see him off for the last time. Regardless of what had just happened, at this moment, everyone fell silent, quietly watching the scene unfold. He still thought he could save Li Xinqing. Unfortunately, the fungus had already infected the brain. Even if the fungus was dead now, the damage to the brain was irreversible. He recalled their first encounter in Haiqing, the street, and the sincere smile of that young soldier. He had actually died just like that. A hint of blood red appeared in Wang Qing's eyes, and he remained silent for a long time. On Pinkfeng Mountain, there had been so much death. He would not cooperate with the super fungi. They were an alien race, viewing human life as insignificant. They wanted to replace humanity. Let us see who can eliminate whom. Meanwhile, on Pinkfeng Mountain, the flames had already extinguished. Numerous infected humans and creatures stood stiffly like statues at various locations on the mountain, with fungi covering the land, enveloping the forests and human structures, penetrating deep into the mountain's foundations. The entire peak was their home. They did not need computers or human brain structures. Their vast fungal network could process and compute like a computer, thinking and judging like the human brain. Their consciousness was shared, and their neural networks interconnected. Each microscopic fungal individual was a complete life form. Controlling a biological entity similar to humans required thousands of fungal lives working together. At this moment, they were communicating rapidly within. We have already tested that human could not possibly be a true human. It might be, like us, a reviver disguised in human form. But its civilization had already declined. Unfortunately, I could not determine which era it belonged to or whether it had a sequence of civilization. That is not important. Judging by its technological display, its civilization must have once been a glorious technological civilization, even capable of leaving behind complete interstellar warships to the present day. Would it be willing to join us? It is very stubborn. I gave it some time, and we believe it will recognize the situation. Given the technology exhibited by its aircraft, it is certainly not simple. If we could get it to join us, sharing the advanced technologies we lack, it would be a tremendous help. Our infiltration in the region has already begun. Soon, it will see human fragility and realize that humanity cannot stop us. If it makes the right choice, that would be best, but if not, we must eliminate it quickly. We understand that there are already enough alien races in this area. We need to complete the cleanup swiftly to establish our dominance here. The first to be eliminated are those weak yet self-important humans. The infiltration has begun. Currently, nearly 1,000 people in the region have become our companions, while those foolish humans remain completely unaware. We believe that this place will soon become the next Pinkfeng Mountain, our paradise. In the dead and lightless peaks, in the microscopic world, countless terrifying fungi cheered and rejoiced, invigorated for the battlefield ahead. Chapter 161. Ancient Planet in the Wilderness. 120 kilometers from Pinkfeng Mountain towards the region, the campfire on the ground had not yet extinguished, and there was still a bit of broth left in the beef pot over the fire. However, the atmosphere in the room became somewhat subtle. The soldiers from the military and the personnel from the research center all cast strange looks at Wang Qing. Xu Bing's gaze towards Wang Qing was similar. The warmth she had just begun to show was now replaced by a coldness, as if they were back to the time of their first encounter, where any disagreement could lead to a confrontation. If others were merely suspicious, Xu Bing was beginning to believe. Her understanding of Wang Qing and his aircraft was deeper than anyone else's. She knew just how incredible his technology was, and after such a long time apart, it had undergone tremendous changes, showcasing a self-upgrading capability. Was such technology even possible for humanity? Previously, Xu Bing thought Wang Qing might belong to some secret department in a certain region, thus having access to advanced technologies. But now, what Wang Qing displayed had surpassed the notion of next-generation technology. Although at first glance his aircraft seemed ordinary, the intricacies within were all cutting-edge technologies far beyond human capabilities. In this light, the response from the recently infected seemed clearer and more accurate. At that moment, Zheng Hailong stepped forward to break the silence, asking, "Brother Wang Qing, what should we do next? Should we return to Fengtian?" Coming from an ordinary background with limited education, Zheng Hailong hadn't fully grasped what Li Xinqing had just said. He was less concerned than others, and Wang Qing's earlier gesture of goodwill had significantly increased his fondness for him. Noticing that everyone else seemed to harbor some reservations about Wang Qing, he quickly approached him, fearing that Wang Qing might feel awkward. Wang Qing, on the other hand, wasn't thinking that much. He had just sent off Li Xinqing and received an overwhelming amount of unexpected information and truths from the super fungi, leaving him with a mix of emotions. His thoughts were no longer on the present situation but on the complex disputes of the future. He increasingly felt that this global catastrophe of terrifying mutations was far from simple. Like many others, he had previously thought that the first day of the apocalypse marked the beginning of the end and the arrival of the worst disaster. But now, he suddenly realized that while it was indeed the beginning, it was by no means the worst calamity. Beneath the global apocalypse, A more terrifying shadow was awakening from deep within this ancient planet, sharpening its teeth and bloodthirsty, fixated on humanity. Ironically, humans were completely unaware of their existence, viewing the monsters born from the apocalyptic mutations as their primary foes. Were those strange creatures in the coastal city also remnants of an ancient civilization? The old civilization was slowly exhaling at humanity's doorstep, and with danger approaching, it was time to open their eyes and fight. Otherwise, the consequence would be having one's throat slit in their sleep, without even knowing how they died. This is not an exaggeration. The situation at a certain mountain is a case in point. Even though the fleeing group from the coastal city encountered some unclear circumstances that led to significant losses in personnel and resources, they still had a considerable number of people reach that mountain, yet they didn't stir even a ripple and were silently consumed by a certain type of superfungus, which even turned the mountain into their nest. The most terrifying part is that they failed without even having the chance to fight back. This serves as a heavy warning. The leader was filled with anxiety. He didn't have time to care about what others thought and quickly returned to the campfire. Before long, another individual sat down beside him. The leader glanced at her, but didn't ask if she was afraid of his foolish talk. Instead, he began recounting his previous encounters with these superfungi, especially the fact that the entire mountain had been infected and the bizarre biological canon. The other person's reaction was quite normal. Unlike others who showed doubt, she listened quietly and communicated with him normally. She analyzed and concluded, "So, my earlier assumptions can be completely overturned. This is an ancient civilization, rather than a new intelligent life form resulting from global mutations. It may sound unbelievable, but it is normal. I don't know your level of knowledge or if you've seen relevant information, but actually, we discovered traces of ancient civilizations on Earth a long time ago. The information released through archaeological studies is just a small part of it. For example, in our region, the Sanxingdui site and the Temple of Ramses II in Egypt, among other ancient relics, have shown signs of what may be evidence of other civilizations. However, to avoid causing unrest, this information has been kept strictly confidential and not disclosed. Previously, many in academia believed these other civilizations might have come from beyond Earth, but this hypothesis cannot explain why they have now vanished. Now, I think the answer has surfaced. Those ancient civilizations did not come from beyond. They are remnants from Earth's ancient eras. As you know, Earth has existed for 4.6 billion years, and our current era has only been around for 65 million years. Compared to 4.6 billion years, that's just a drop in the ocean. Humanity has only been evolving for a little over 4 million years. As of now, our archaeological excavations are still quite superficial. We have no way of knowing what the world was like billions of years ago. However, it is not impossible for other civilizations and life forms that are completely different from us to have existed in the past. If humanity could emerge in just 4 million years, leading us to this digital and industrial age, then how many 4 million year periods have there been in 4.6 billion years? Our planet is in the habitable zone, having gone through countless cycles of life and extinction. Of course, these are just my previous guesses and judgments. As I mentioned earlier, if these superfungi were born under this global mutation, their evolution speed would be too fast. The growth of intelligence and the mutation of form are clearly different. Without guidance and input, it would take a long time to take shape. I just can't believe it. But now, after hearing what you said, I think the answer is quite clear. What we face is a civilization from Earth's ancient times, one that has evolved into a complete biological system, possessing wisdom and intelligence, even its own culture and beliefs. Moreover, they have technological forms different from ours. The biological canon you mentioned is something our technology simply cannot achieve. I don't know much about this area, but based on my research in the biological field, we can manufacture weapons from steel, create viruses and biochemical weapons that can kill humans, but we cannot produce anything like the biological canon you witnessed. What they demonstrate is not something that happens overnight. It is the sedimentation of history and the foundation of civilization. They should be, as they claim, an ancient civilization. Furthermore, if what they just said is true, perhaps there are more such ancient civilizations on Earth. Wang Chung probably knows a bit about this, but when Zhang Tsongtong expresses it this way, Wang Chung has a more intuitive and clearer feeling. His thoughts and judgments seem to have become coherent and clear under Zhang Tsongtong's analysis. He not only thought of the strange creatures seen in Haicheng, but also the bizarre clouds. Wang Chung furrowed his brow deeply and said, "But why didn't they appear before? Why now?" You asked a very pertinent question. You know about the extinction of the dinosaurs, right? Throughout the 4.6 billion years of Earth's history, terrifying mass extinction events have occurred from time to time. Asteroids, volcanic eruptions, atmospheric loss, rising temperatures, extreme cold on Earth, and so on. These disasters have the capacity to destroy and reshape the entire Earth's ecosystem. In the past, academia believed from a contemporary perspective that many eras on Earth were unsuitable for biological survival, let alone the emergence of civilization. However, I think this discovery has taught everyone a lesson. Any extremely harsh environment could give rise to intelligent civilizations, though their forms of existence and characteristics are entirely different from ours. Perhaps, in every past era, there existed dominant civilizations. Every mass extinction event has had an immense impact on the environment, reshaping the Earth in ways that can fundamentally alter its living conditions, making it unsuitable for species that once thrived. As a result, old species perish while new ones emerge. I speculate that civilizations like super fungi may have once been the dominant life forms in a time that suited their existence. However, as the Earth's environment changed, they were forced into a state of eternal slumber, waiting for a future when conditions would again be favorable for their revival. This also reflects their powerful nature. Unlike creatures such as dinosaurs, which could only vanish forever during mass extinction events, if remnants of ancient civilizations still exist, I believe the situation would be similar. This might explain why they disappeared so suddenly. Perhaps traces of them lingered during the early days of humanity, recorded in various ancient relics. Yet, as time passed, those traces faded away. However, this does not clarify why they are beginning to awaken now. I speculate that it may be related to the global cataclysm we are experiencing, or perhaps due to humanity's excessive alteration and destruction of the planet. In recent years, the Earth's atmosphere and ecological environment have been changing, becoming increasingly inhospitable for human life. Yet, the current state of this planet may align with the conditions of ancient Earth. Thus, those dormant civilizations beneath the ancient land may be silently awakening deep within the planet. Chapter 162. Brother, there are alien spaceships in the sky. Zhang Tsongtong exhaled. Her words were finished, but her beautifully shaped brows remained furrowed. Clearly, her statement was not only directed at Wang Cheng, but also a reflection of her own thoughts, analyses, and judgments. Zhang Tsongtong's words did not go unheard. Although her voice was low, the surrounding silence made it audible, and everyone listened with a mix of intrigue and unease. Perhaps, in the eyes of Yi Anshan and others, even if Zhang Tsongtong's statements were merely her analysis, they should not be shared with those who are uninvolved, as it could cause panic and a series of negative consequences. However, Zhang Tsongtong was just an expert, not in a high-ranking position, so she didn't have many reservations. She spoke her mind, especially since everything was unfolding rapidly, and like Wang Cheng, she had countless thoughts and reflections. Fearing she might forget them if she didn't express them in conversation, Wang Cheng furrowed his brows deeply, contemplating for a moment before shaking his head. No, something is still off. If your hypothesis is correct, and the Earth's environment is now suitable for their revival, then is it also suitable for other civilizations? It's likely that the revived civilizations are not just one. That cloud-like organism is clearly different from super fungi. Previously, Wang Cheng didn't understand what it was, but now he considers it might also be an ancient civilization, quietly awakening without humanity's awareness, spreading across the skies while concealing its presence. From this perspective, Zhang Tsongtong's assumptions have several flaws. Zhang Tsongtong shook her head and said, I don't know. This may be related to the apocalypse sweeping the globe. They are right. We really do not understand our planet or our world, and thus we cannot find answers. This matter is too important and unbelievable. When we return to the capital, perhaps I can collaborate with other experts from the research center to discuss and study it together. Wang Cheng glanced at her, curious about these answers as well. For Zhang Tsongtong, there was an excitement about academia and a heightened emotion for uncovering the secrets of research. However, what Wang Cheng saw was an unparalleled crisis. In the eyes of these ancient civilizations, humanity seemed like immature children, interlopers, and outsiders, even a thorn in their side. Coexistence was difficult to achieve. Only destruction and death seemed possible. Their goal was clear, to restore and revive their civilization. How could multiple civilizations coexist on one planet? It would only lead to competition for resources, hindering the development of their own civilizations and causing stagnation. Therefore, clearing obstacles was the only and inevitable choice. Pingfeng Mountain had already fallen, and the survivor base in the capital province would undoubtedly be the next target. They had to return to the capital as soon as possible. Wang Cheng realized he could not linger any longer and quickly stood up, signaling everyone to board the ship and leave. The military soldiers and other awakened warriors appeared somewhat uneasy. The information they received was too shocking and unbelievable, almost overturning their previous understanding of their planet. No one had ever imagined that there could be a civilization completely different from humanity on their own planet. Those terrifying super fungi might just be an ancient civilization that had recently awakened, and they were now showing their fangs to humanity. The gloom and terror this brought were even more frightening than the mutated creatures and the apparent apocalypse. Moreover, their attitude towards Wang Cheng was somewhat subtle, as if they were doubting his identity, questioning whether he was also a resurrector of some ancient civilization. However, Zhang Tsongtong remained calm throughout. She stood up beside Wang Cheng, looked at him, and said, I don't believe what it said. I know you are not a resurrector. You are human, just like me. Wang Cheng was slightly taken aback. Hearing this, he initially thought that Zhang Chongtong was trying to reassure him, fearing that he, suspected to be a resurrector, might start a massacre if his identity was discovered. But when he turned to look at her, he found that this elegant professor was gazing at him earnestly, and her words seemed heartfelt. Why? He asked. Zhang Chongtong smiled and replied, I told you, I've seen your resume. Your behavior aligns with human logic. There are traces to follow, and it's perfectly normal. Wang Cheng frowned. But that doesn't seem to prove anything. Maybe I'm just pretending? I study biology, and that biology is humanity. I know humans very well. Therefore, I am confident that I am willing to step forward for you in this matter. When we reach the survivor base in Fengtian, if anyone causes trouble because of this, I will speak on your behalf. I believe that among this team, my words carry the most weight. Zhang Tsongtong smiled gently, a captivating aura about her as she stepped forward. But she was right. With Lu Feng and He Dong dead, Zhang Tsongtong was currently the highest-ranking person in this team. Wang Cheng was taken aback for a moment and then shook his head with a smile. He wasn't worried about how to explain things upon returning to Fengtian. The situation was fraught with danger. His battleship had also reached level 5, giving him confidence in both advance and retreat. This time, returning to Fengtian, Wang Cheng had no need to hide anymore. He intended to lay all his cards on the table and cooperate with the military. Taking advantage of the recent revival of the civilization of these super fungi, before they had fully developed, he planned to take action and eliminate them. Wang Cheng certainly didn't want to sit idly by. At that moment, Xu Bing also walked over, glanced at Wang Cheng, and said, I don't care about any revivalist or whatever, as long as you're still the Wang Cheng I know. I will continue to honor our promise. But if I find anything off about you, I will be the first to cut your throat. After delivering this harsh statement, Xu Bing directly walked ahead and boarded the battleship. Wang Cheng's mouth twitched. Although Xu Bing's words were harsh, he wasn't angry. Through their interactions during this time, he had come to understand this fierce, awakened girl. She was loyal, which was why she had kept her promise to Wang Cheng, knowing about his situation but never speaking of it to anyone else. However, she adhered to her identity and duties as a soldier. If Wang Cheng posed a threat to humanity, she would not hold back. She was just cold by nature and didn't like to express her true feelings outwardly. But the phrase as long as you're still the Wang Cheng I know had already revealed her true thoughts to a large extent. Although their journey had been bumpy, filled with conflicts and cooperation, regardless of their expressions, Xu Bing had long since lowered her guard against Wang Cheng and considered him a friend. Out of friendship, she kept her promise and protected her friend's secrets. Out of her duty as a soldier, she remained vigilant and cautious of Wang Cheng. What a contradictory yet upright character he was. Wang Cheng couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration in his heart. Subsequently, Wang Cheng also entered the cockpit of the battleship. From the very beginning, he hadn't switched the battleship's form and maintained its current state. At this moment, as he took over the cockpit, the battleship began to rise steadily into the air, speeding towards the survivor base in Fengtian. The battleship soared through the sky quickly, its thrusters emitting scorching flames. Although one side of the battleship was damaged, the damage was not severe and did not affect its stability. Wang Cheng kept the cockpit sealed, so Zhang Tsongtong and the others could only hide in the rear cabin. Without Wang Cheng granting them permission, they couldn't access or study anything in the back. And Wang Cheng didn't have to worry about them obtaining any information regarding his battleship. Upon reaching level 5, Wang Cheng's control over the warship was further enhanced. Whenever he wished, he could lock out any functions and access to the warship's systems for anyone other than himself. Others would be unable to obtain any information or data about the warship through any means. As Wang Cheng flew through the air, gradually approaching the capital, he suddenly decelerated sharply in midair. His radar displayed a human convoy directly below him. This area was on the road from High City to the capital, and it had been a long time since the Great Escape from High City had ended. Why were there still people heading from High City to the survivor base in the capital? Wang Cheng was slightly startled, suspecting it might be a human team disguised by super fungi intending to release their fungal entities in the capital. He immediately slowed down, preparing to investigate further. If that were the case, he would eliminate them instantly. Wang Cheng's warship quickly descended and slowed down. On the ground, the convoy also heard the roaring sound above and looked up in shock. Among them, a thin man pointed at the sky, panic etched on his face, and shouted, "This is bad. Big brother, this is bad. There's an alien spaceship up there. It's coming for us." Chapter 163. Familiar faces on the national highway from High City to the survivor base in the capital, desolation reigned as a disheveled convoy traveled through the night. At that moment, directly above them, flashes of light appeared, and a massive flying vehicle descended with a thunderous roar, its lights flickering as it swooped down from the sky. Instantly, chaos erupted within the convoy, and people scattered in panic. The man referred to as Big Brother reacted swiftly, climbing out of the vehicle and standing on the roof, raising his hands in surrender, fearing that the occupants of the flying vehicle might not see him. His companions, who were trying to escape, were taken aback, momentarily stunned before they followed suit and raised their hands in surrender as well. In such a wilderness, with such a large target, there was no point in running. The only option was to surrender. Surprisingly, surrender seemed to have an effect. The sleek, dark flying vehicle rapidly descended, slowing down as it reached a position directly above them. Then came to a halt, hovering over the convoy. The survivors in the convoy were filled with dread. The first lean man who had screamed before leaned over and whispered to the big brother who had surrendered first, "Big brother, what is happening? Is this a military aircraft or aliens? This is really, really terrifying." The big brother wore a puzzled expression, maintaining a calm facade while feeling a wave of panic inside. He couldn't even find the words to respond, merely shooting a glance at the one who had spoken as a sign of authority. Such a colossal creation of steel and technology, descending from the sky, felt like a divine presence to these fleeing survivors, a force that could decide their fate. The big brother was acutely aware of the vast disparity in power, which only intensified his fear. Just then, a voice from the hovering vehicle above them sent shivers down their spines, a voice that sounded somewhat familiar. "Chinjigua? Li Feng's Han." For a moment, the man on the roof and the thin man were both stunned. "Does he know us? Wait, I recognize that voice. It's the brother from the city." A look of surprise suddenly appeared on Chunjigua's face. Above them, inside the fifth-level battleship, Wang Cheng also looked at the scene with a strange expression. He actually recognized the group below. They were none other than Chunjigua and his companions, whom he had encountered in the coastal city. Previously, they had met at a gas station in the city and had briefly traveled together on the road out of the city. He never expected to encounter them again here. However, Wang Cheng remembered that the last time they met, they were in good shape, part of a large convoy with many survivors escaping with them. Now, though, Chunjigua's convoy had shrunk to just 5 vehicles and a dozen people, all looking pallid. If it weren't for Wang Cheng's radar, he might not have even detected such a small target from the sky. Seeing familiar faces brought an indescribable feeling, regardless of their past relationship. Especially after knowing the dramatic changes in the coastal city and the recent death of Li Xinxing, Chunjigua and his companions felt more endearing to Wang Cheng. Of course, this was also because their relationship was not bad. Chunjigua had previously helped Wang Cheng, and although his group was not exactly the good type in this apocalypse, they were pragmatic, leaving Wang Cheng with a decent impression of them. But then he furrowed his brows. How did they end up here? After the brief surprise, deep contemplation followed. Wang Cheng thought for a moment, maintaining the battleship in a hovering state directly above Chunjigua and his group. He stood up, locked the cockpit, and descended the battleship with Zhang Tsongtong and Xu Bing. He had questions for Chunjigua and the others. The emotions of Chunjigua and his companions were akin to a roller coaster. They didn't know much about Wang Cheng's abilities and certainly did not expect that the formidable figure descending from above was Wang Cheng. However, Chunjigua considered his relationship with Wang Cheng to be decent, which made him feel relieved, thinking that his life was no longer in danger. When Wang Cheng and the others landed, Chunjigua was surrounded by his subordinates, who were flattering him, praising his keen insight for recognizing Wang Cheng as someone extraordinary. Otherwise, they might have been dealt with just moments ago. As the flattery continued, Wang Cheng and his group arrived, and a few subordinates, eager to curry favor, stepped back with smiles upon seeing Wang Cheng. Compared to other survivor groups and even factions of thugs that Wang Cheng had encountered, Chunjigua and his subordinates clearly adhered to a code of conduct in this apocalypse, which is also why they managed to survive longer than others. Xu Bing recognized Chunjigua and remained silent, while Zhang Tsongtong was somewhat surprised. "You know these people? They're from the coastal city too?" Wang Cheng nodded slightly, keeping his distance, and whispered, "I know them. They likely know what happened in High City and on Pingfeng Mountain, but they might also be infected. You'll need to observe them closely later, and if necessary, you can have your people check on them." Zhang Tsongtong glanced at Wang Cheng and slowly nodded. "If you knew them before, you can talk to them about what happened. If they have any memory, it can at least prove they haven't been manipulated by those super fungi, which clearly cannot read human memories. They can only invade the human brain, using it as a nest for their growth and a breeding ground for nutrients." At that moment, Chunjigua approached on his own. He looked at Wang Cheng, the 2 beautiful women beside him, and the large spaceship behind him, and realized that this brother Wang Cheng might have struck it rich. At the very least, he was no longer on the same level as ordinary survivors like them. Chunjigua felt a sense of joy and pride. "As expected of me, I have a good eye for people. I could tell at a glance that this second son was no ordinary person. I didn't offend him and maintained a good relationship. Otherwise, I might have been dead by now." Feeling pleased, Chunjigua was always quick-witted, so he didn't dare to be careless. He came up to Wang Cheng, shook hands, exchanged some pleasantries, and probed Wang Cheng's intentions. After learning that Wang Cheng had no plans to harm them, He confirmed his safety and finally breathed a sigh of relief, straightening his back a little. Wang Qing certainly had no intention of harming Chen Jigua and the others, as long as they weren't infected by the super fungi. How could he possibly take action against them? Wang Qing didn't avoid Chen Jigua's pleasantries. Instead, he went along with it, reminiscing as suggested by Zhang Chongtong. Chen Jigua was able to respond fluently about past events, which put Wang Qing at ease. Then Wang Qing looked at Chen Jigua and asked the question he was most concerned about. How did you end up here? I remember that after we separated, you went with Zhao Nan and the others to find reinforcements, right? What happened later? Did you meet up with Zhao Nan, Li Xinqing, and Captain Chen? Although Wang Qing hadn't seen Chen Jigua again after that, and hadn't he inquired about him with Zhao Nan or Li Xinqing, given the circumstances, Chen Jigua should have been with them. If that was the case, Chen Jigua and the others might know what had happened to Qin Hai, Captain Chen, and Li Xinqing. Zhang Chongtong also showed a surprised expression upon hearing this, not expecting that Wang Qing's acquaintance was actually related to the recently infected Li Xinqing. Did they know what had really happened in Hai City? In an instant, both of their gazes were fixed on Chen Jigua, feeling anxious yet a bit hopeful. Wang Qing hoped to hear good news from Chen Jigua. He admired Captain Chen and didn't want him to die silently beneath the waves of the apocalypse. Only Shubing's gaze darted between the few of them. However, upon hearing this question, a hint of fear appeared on Chen Jigua's previously smiling face. As if he had thought of something terrifying. He whispered, "Actually, I don't know how to explain it. We have been circling around in the same place in a strange manner these days." Chapter 164. They are chasing something. Chen Jigua and his companions' experiences greatly exceeded Wang Qing and Zhang Congtong's expectations. Chen Jigua was quite a rational person, and he wanted to build a good relationship with Wang Qing, who seemed to be on the rise. Therefore, he answered Wang Qing's questions honestly. According to Chen Jigua, their journey had been quite tragic, which could be seen from the size of the team around him. On the night of the major retreat from Haicheng, after parting ways with Chen Jigua, Wang Qing went to assist Zhang Rui's unit, while Chen Jigua and the others followed Zhao Nan and left to seek reinforcements. Hoping to contact other brother units for support, Wang Qing was well aware of these events. Later, Zhao Nan successfully found a unit to support Zhang Rui's team, which was able to break through with the help of experts. Subsequently, Zhao Nan and Li Xinqing returned to assist Wang Qing in the breakout. However, the situation on Chen Jigua's side was different from what Wang Qing had imagined. At that time, Chen Jigua said, "We didn't follow Zhao Nan back to rescue anyone." According to him, they had encountered remnants of an infantry regiment that had almost been scattered. Their mission was to escort something. Upon hearing about Zhang Rui's unit, the military officer in charge immediately turned back to rescue them and sent part of the troops forward with Chen Jigua and others to continue pursuing a fleeing group from the temporary survivor base in Haicheng, which was already out of sight. This was a reasonable decision. On one hand, they had something to escort, and on the other hand, no matter the level of influence Chen Jigua and his companions had among ordinary survivors, they were seen as just ordinary survivors in the eyes of the military. Splitting up was the best choice. It seems that the thing this infantry regiment was escorting was not as important as those experts, Zhang Congtong remarked at that moment. Yes. Later on, when something went wrong, I saw what they were escorting. It was a root branch from that terrifying giant tree in Haicheng. The creature's trunk was likely for research purposes. Without experts, having the material was useless. Chen Jigua nodded and continued, "At that time, we were already at the edge of the city in Haicheng. The situation looked optimistic, and there were no monsters around. We thought we would catch up quickly and reunite with the others behind us. But unexpectedly, we ended up not catching up with the people ahead. And those behind us did not arrive either. We took a wrong turn and entered a wilderness, and as a result, we got trapped there." Upon reaching this point, Chen Jigua's account became somewhat vague and chaotic, not because he intended to hide anything, but because he himself was unclear about the situation at that time. He merely stated, "It's strange, although there were not many military personnel with us, only 7. They carried communication devices, maps, and some navigation instruments. They should have been more professional in finding the way than we ordinary people, so we always followed them. Wherever they went, we followed, only thinking about escaping from the coastal city as quickly as possible and getting as far away from those crimson spores as we could. However, it was particularly odd that those military personnel led us on a path that did not follow the national road or the previous highway, but instead took a shortcut that eventually led us into the wilderness. At first, we didn't think much of it, given the chaotic situation and the terrifying attacks from the diggers. The fleeing group might have changed direction, and with the military's heavy bombardment, it was understandable. But once we entered the wilderness, we realized something was wrong. The view was wide open, yet we couldn't see any trace of the fleeing group ahead. Even if we had fallen far behind them, we shouldn't have been completely out of touch, right? Moreover, Wanqing brothers, you also hadn't caught up for a long time. I felt something was off and spoke with the military personnel. It was then I learned that they also didn't know what was happening. They had originally intended to get onto the highway but had somehow ended up here. I found their explanation a bit puzzling. But there was nothing we could do but continue on this path. If we were lost, we should find the right road and reunite with the main military unit. However, by this point, we realized that no matter which direction we went, we were just going around in circles, as if we were trapped in a ghostly maze. Previously, I wouldn't have believed in such things, and neither would the military personnel. Once we recognized the situation, we thought it was due to being lost. As the area was too open with no reference points, we decided to change our approach and explore differently. We camped overnight and planned to search the next day. This method worked to some extent. We were no longer going in circles, but instead moving in a wide loop. At that time, the military personnel still could not contact their other units. With no other choice, we could only move little by little, thinking that as long as we could get out of the wilderness and see the road, we would have a sense of direction. Fortunately, we had ample supplies, so a few days' delay was not a big issue. However, the situation at that time was more than just this. We got lost in the wilderness for nearly 5 days. From the very first day, people started to go missing at night. Initially, we didn't think much of it. After all, in such a tense situation, it was normal for someone to not believe in the group and leave on their own, especially since there were no signs of blood, sounds, or fighting to indicate the involvement of any creatures. However, as time went on, we began to realize that the disappearances were unusual, as more and more people were missing, including some of the soldiers. We observed at night, but for those few days, it was pitch dark without stars or the moon, making visibility terrifyingly low. We paid close attention, yet more people went missing, and no one could say when those individuals had last been seen. On the final day, out of 7 soldiers, 6 had vanished, leaving only 1. I watched him run into the darkness. He claimed he saw the glow of a large military escape force in the dark and wanted to lead us to chase after them. However, none of us saw any light in the direction he ran. That place was completely dark, with nothing there. It was strange. Those nights were extremely dark, and visibility was nearly zero. Once that soldier stepped into the darkness, he was almost impossible to track. Still, some people followed him, and they never returned. The rest of us stayed behind and started a fire, waiting until dawn when suddenly a loud, unusual noise echoed through the sky. We were all startled. By then, we were extremely frightened, and only a few of us remained. Following the sound, we looked up and saw a large area of clouds moving swiftly across the sky, which had remained mostly unchanged for days. Those clouds looked odd. I knew that clouds usually move, but that day, they were like a group of fighter jets, moving at incredible speed from one place to another. At that moment, we had no idea what was happening. But later, I thought about that scene, and those clouds seemed like living beings chasing something. At this point, Chen Jigua found it hard to continue. He recalled those experiences and was filled with terror. Wang Cheng and the others listened with their hearts racing. Zhang Tong frowned deeply, seemingly pondering Chen Jigua's words. Wang Cheng also thought about it. Those clouds were probably related to his own experiences. Chen Jigua didn't know what they were, and that brought him fear, which stemmed from uncertainty. Wang Cheng had been unclear before, but now he felt that those clouds might be connected to a revived civilization similar to the super mutant fungi. But what were those clouds chasing? Wang Cheng pressed on, asking, "Did you see clearly? Those clouds were chasing something. What were they chasing?" "I don't know. I couldn't see clearly. We were all scared at that time." Chen Jigua thought for a moment, took a breath, and continued. "We didn't know what was happening. It might have been a group of mutated creatures. We were all terrified, fearing that those moving clouds would come down to attack us. So we ran in the opposite direction. As a result, we actually managed to escape and found the highway, completely getting away from that desolate wilderness. After being trapped for so many days, we were finally out, and everyone was very happy, but also very frightened. Then we made our way to Pingfeng Mountain." Upon hearing this, Wang Cheng and Zhang Tsongtong were pulled out of their thoughts by this statement and almost blurted out, "You went to Pingfeng Mountain?" Chapter 165, Doomsday City. The expressions of Zhang Tsongtong and Wang Cheng instantly became sharp. Based on the timeline, if Chen Jigua and the others reached Pingfeng Mountain 6 days after leaving Haiqing, the changes at Pingfeng Mountain might have already begun. Therefore, it was difficult to say that Chen Jigua and his group had not been infected by the super fungus. Chen Jigua was also startled by their reaction, then shook his head and said, "We intended to go to Pingfeng Mountain, but we couldn't make it. We encountered a terrifying group of mutated pigs. There were already not many of us left, and we suffered heavy losses. After running for a while, when we came to our senses, we were far from Pingfeng Mountain. At that time, we actually still wanted to go to Pingfeng Mountain, but we met another group of survivors. They told us that Pingfeng Mountain was done for, and the evacuation team from the temporary survivor base in Haiqing had already been wiped out when they left the city. There was no point in going to Pingfeng Mountain. There was nothing there, only monsters. Through them, we learned that the survivor base in Fengtian was well established, and many scattered survivor groups from Haiqing were heading there. That's why we headed to Fengtian, but we spent quite a bit of time recovering and gathering supplies along the way. Unexpectedly, before we even reached Fengtian. We encountered you here. Brother Wang Cheng, how are you? Did you get separated from Zhang Ruizhen and Captain Zhang Ying? In response to Chen Jigua's answer, Wang Cheng and Zhang Tsongtong exchanged glances, both of them feeling a bit relieved. However, this also meant that later on, Zhang Tsongtong's team would conduct a detailed check on Chen Jigua and the others. As for Chen Jigua's question, Wang Cheng chose to answer what he could share, such as how he had already reached the survivor base in Fengtian and was now cooperating with the teams there to investigate the situation at Pingfeng Mountain and the evacuation team from Haiqing. Among other things, Chen Jigua was no fool. On the contrary, he was quite sharp. Before asking this question, he had already made some guesses about Wang Cheng's situation. And at this moment, it served as confirmation. Despite being psychologically prepared, hearing what Wang Cheng said filled Chen Jigua's face with excitement and envy. They are still struggling in this area, and they haven't even seen the door of the survivor base in the capital city. While Wang Cheng has already reached the survivor base and is doing quite well, even qualified to cooperate with military personnel. In Chen Jigua's view, such a large aircraft could not have been developed by Wang Cheng alone. It is likely that it was granted to him by the military at the survivor base. This further reflects Wang Cheng's rising status within the survivor base, thriving and flourishing. Chen Jigua has his own small team, and even at this stage, they remain loyal to him, with supplies never running short. To ordinary survivors, he is an object of envy and jealousy, and he takes pride in that. However, compared to Wang Cheng, his achievements seem insignificant. In the hierarchy of survivors, others admire Chen Jigua's lifestyle and methods, seeing him as an extraordinary figure, while he envies Wang Cheng and his group. If Wang Cheng were to reveal his battleship and connections with the research center, Chen Jigua might even start flattering him. Thinking of this, he felt increasingly fortunate. Thankfully, he had the insight to recognize Wang Cheng's potential and made connections early on. At that moment, Zhang Tsongtong spoke up, inquiring about Chen Jigua's information, such as what he had heard about the escape teams from Haiqing. Like other survivors, both Chen Jigua and Wang Cheng, those who had not been to the Pingfeng Mountain area received remarkably consistent information. They were almost unaware that part of the Haiqing escape teams had retreated to Pingfeng Mountain, only knowing that the main team from Haiqing had disappeared. Stepping aside, where Chen Jigua and the others couldn't hear, Zhang Tsongtong analyzed. So many people are spreading the same possibility. This news seems credible. The Haiqing escape teams must have encountered something on the way out of the city, and only a small number reached Pingfeng Mountain. But what exactly did they encounter? Wang Cheng said softly, "Do you really think Chen Jigua and the others got lost?" It sounded like they might have gotten lost. Those who went missing likely had a mental breakdown under immense pressure. After all, in this era, such occurrences are not unusual. But I still feel something is off. Wang Cheng, we should return to the survivor base as soon as possible. If what Chen Jigua said is true, it must be reported quickly. Even if they merely got lost, the strange clouds pursuing them must also be communicated to the command center. Zhang Tsongtong's judgment aligned with Wang Cheng's thoughts. They needed to return to the base quickly and plan for the long term. The surrounding wilderness was engulfed in darkness. But after everything they had been through, Wang Cheng had an unsettling feeling that this once familiar land was becoming strange. In the darkness, it felt as if countless eyes were watching them with a cold and bloodthirsty gaze. Human beings had become the prey of the hunters in the wilderness. And what was terrifying was that they didn't even know what those hunters looked like or what abilities they possessed. This familiar world was becoming dangerous and elusive. At present, Zhang Tsongtong arranged for people to check on Chen Jigua and others. In fact, it was normal for Chen Jigua and his team to take such a long time to get from Haiqing to Fengtian. After all, the wasteland in the apocalypse was fraught with dangers, coupled with food and resource shortages. The team had to move cautiously, hiding and stopping frequently. Even with a vehicle, it was hard to speed up. Only someone like Wang Cheng, who had warships, could recklessly confront any obstacles. Even defeating 5th-level monsters without wasting time and swiftly reaching the survivor base in Fengtian. Others naturally lacked such abilities and were much slower. Once Chen Jigua and the others realized the identities of Zhang Tsongtong and his group, they cooperated well, chatting quietly in a corner while undergoing checks. Li Fangzhan listened to Chen Jigua talk about the situation with Wang Cheng, his face full of excitement. "Big brother, you're amazing. Isn't Wang Cheng a big shot at the Fengtian survivor base now? We haven't even arrived at the Fengtian survivor base, and we already have connections there?" The Huaxia region was a society built on relationships, and in the apocalypse, connections within the survivor base were even more crucial. Li Fangzhan hit the nail on the head, and the other younger brothers all showed ecstatic expressions. "Big brother, this move is brilliant. If other survivors find out, they will envy us to death. We haven't even reached Fengtian, yet our connections are already established. I see this Wang Cheng brother is now quite remarkable. Even that so-called expert treats him with respect. Yes, those experts in the apocalypse have high standards. Remember that expert we buttered up at the temporary survivor base in Haiqing? Their assistant was almost looking down on everyone. Hee hee. Can I tell you that I didn't expect Wang Cheng to become this powerful so quickly? Chen Jigua couldn't help but smile, though he tried to maintain a serious demeanor to uphold his authority as the leader of the group. What do you know? This is called planning ahead. Besides, Wang Cheng might not even have the time to deal with us right now. It's not the right moment. Li Fang's Han, prepare that box of Feitian Mitai we seized earlier. Make sure it's intact. When we get to Fengtian, I'll have a good chat with Wang Cheng. Chen Jigua knew how to be measured. He wanted to strengthen ties with Wang Cheng, but noticed that both Wang Cheng and Zhang Chengtong were anxious. So he decided not to cause trouble at the moment. Building relationships shouldn't create chaos for others. Otherwise, it would backfire. The preliminary results of Chen Jigua and the others' checks came out quickly, showing no issues. Everyone then set off towards the Fengtian survivor base. Wang Cheng, being an old acquaintance of Chen Jigua, intended to take them along, although they were close to the Fengtian survivor base. If it were up to Chen Jigua and his team alone, it would likely take a long time. However, Wang Cheng's warship couldn't carry such a large convoy, so it simply took off, allowing Chen Jigua and his team to drive behind at full speed, with Wang Cheng's warship just slightly slowing down its flight speed. Chen Jigua and others initially didn't understand what was happening, but soon realized that the warship from the city was advancing, flying low and eliminating all the mutated creatures encountered along the way. Chen Jigua and his companions no longer needed to proceed with caution. They could simply accelerate and speed ahead. The entire convoy accelerated wildly on the highway, racing to catch up with the warship that was moving slowly in front. Chen Jigua and the others felt an unprecedented sense of exhilaration and relief, as they no longer had to advance slowly with care or worry about the lurking monsters in the dark wilderness ahead and around them. Everything was being wiped out by the warship in front. The aircraft was moving forward, blasting all the obstructing monsters into the air, and they only needed to follow behind. Li Fang's Han became excited. Big brother, at this rate, we can reach the survivor base in Fengtian before dawn. Chen Jigua looked at the flames from the aircraft's thrusters ahead and couldn't help but say, this brother from the city is quite generous. I thought he would leave us behind, but it turns out he is willing to take us along. Li Fang's Han, have you prepared that Mitai? A whole box, not a bottle less, right? Ready. That was what we originally got to establish connections in Fengtian, and no one in our team dares to touch it. Good. This brother from the city is someone we can befriend. We must treat him well. Meanwhile, the brother from the city had no idea what Chen Jigua and the others were thinking. He was just lending a hand. If they were not acquaintances, that would be one thing, but he actually had a decent relationship with Chen Jigua and the others. If he could help, he would. Even if it cost him a bit of time, it wouldn't significantly affect the overall situation. If it wasted too much time, potentially delaying important matters, he wouldn't have done it. At this point, the long night was nearing its end, and a hint of dawn was appearing on the horizon, gradually revealing the vast cityscape of Fengtian. However, before they got close, the brother from the city furrowed his brow, because something was wrong in Fengtian. Thick smoke was rising from the survivor base, and under the cover of smoke signals, a terrifying level 6 mutated creature, as large as a mountain, was breaching the walls of the survivor base, followed by countless monsters flooding into the city. A system alert suddenly sounded. High-energy biological entity detected. Hunting it may yield special serum and 5,000 energy points. It is recommended that the host participate in the hunt immediately. Just 2 days after leaving, the survivor base in Fengtian had already been violently breached. Chapter 166. The public in panic an hour ago. The night had just enveloped the survivor base in Fengtian when Su Xinghai was about to fall asleep in his bed. Suddenly, he heard a thunderous noise outside, like an earthquake, followed by deafening explosions. The entire house shook from the loud noises, and the glass fractured with fine cracks. He instantly opened his eyes and jumped out of bed. Although the sounds of gunfire had never ceased in the survivor base, it had been over a month of survival since the apocalypse began. He immediately realized that something was wrong this time. He quickly put on his coat and stepped out of his room, just as he saw others outside getting up as well. Yu Jisheng rushed over first and said, Brother Su, it seems like something is off. At that moment, alarms surrounding the entire survivor base in the region blared frantically. Of course, for ordinary people, it was hard to discern what kind of alarm it was just by the sound, but soon, they wouldn't need to think about it anymore. A massive shadow began to emerge from the position of the base's city walls. It was a giant creature, as colossal as a mountain, a level 6 mutated being. Many were familiar with this level 6 mutant. It was a giant turtle that had previously been a level 5 mutated creature outside the survivor base. Its height exceeded 170 meters, and its length was nearly 300 meters. Just moments ago, it had completed a terrifying leap into mutation. By the time the human observers inside the walls noticed the anomaly, it was already too late. It was madly devouring the surrounding monsters, its body swelling like an inflated balloon, growing several times larger in the blink of an eye. Its enormous form moved across the ground, with its massive and intricate shell rising like mountains behind it. Its limbs had evolved into powerful claw-like shapes, moving quickly on the ground. No longer a slow-moving giant turtle. It resembled an agile monster carrying a massive mountain. The military's rocket launchers and heavy artillery set up on the defense line opened fire almost simultaneously. But all it earned them was the creature's terrifying roar. It opened its enormous maw and unleashed a torrent of blood that swept across the survivor base. Then, its massive body advanced effortlessly, breaking through the front defenses of the base and creating a terrifying breach. 200mm armor-piercing shells struck its body, barely causing it any discomfort. Its mouth was filled with shark-like teeth, and it roared hoarsely, spraying horrifying blood arrows as it tore open massive gaps in the city walls. With thick smoke and death trailing behind, it charged into the urban area, immediately turning over a third of the western district of the survivor base into ruins. Behind it, countless monsters, drawn by the scent of blood and humans, surged in. The enormous nest of mutated ants seemed like a small mound of dirt beneath the feet of this level 6 mutant. This scene resembled a terrifying image from a monster movie, with a creature as towering as mountains rampaging through a human city, like an adult casually crushing a child's toy castle. The higher the level of the mutated beings, the more their strength increased geometrically. The strength of a level 6 creature far surpassed that of level 5, and even several level 5 mutants combined would struggle to shake it. From the command center building in the central district of the survivor base, one could even see this terrifying monster, nearly comparable in height to the building itself. Thick smoke rose from the survivor base, and the warriors inside sprang into action. Awakened fighters and military soldiers launched an all-out assault to kill and block the advancing horde of monsters. The guard rushed into the high-level command center and approached Yi Anshan, who was standing in front of the bulletproof floor-to-ceiling window. He said, "Deputy Yi, it's very dangerous here. Please move to the underground command center immediately." However, Yi Anshan did not move. He stood at the window, gazing at the shadows outside. In his hand, he held a report he had just received. Although it was common in the wild for mutated creatures to undergo secondary mutations, sometimes multiple times, leading to more advanced and terrifying forms, with little to no predictable patterns or warning signs, similar to the massive blood-red giant tree that had engulfed the entire city. This report indicated that the sudden mutation of this level 5 creature might not be coincidental. Something had approached it half an hour ago and injected something into this large yet slow level 5 mutated creature. At that time, a patrolling drone captured a blurry image. This was not an accident, it was man-made disaster. Regardless of what that creature was, it could move freely among the mutated creatures, clearly not human. If Wang Chung were here and saw the information in Yi Anshan's hand, he would certainly recognize that the blurry shadow in the report resembled the strange, intelligent beings with biological technology he had encountered in the coastal city. Since the breach incident at the outer defense line, the military at the survivor base in Fengtian had become alert, enhancing patrols and vigilance both inside and outside the survivor base. However, the enemy was concealed among the monsters, making them hard to detect, and it was unimaginable that someone could accelerate the mutation of the monsters. No matter how vigilant they were, they couldn't provide early warnings. At most, they could identify the root of the problem in the first instance. They did not know who the enemy was, where they came from, or in what form they existed, making it nearly impossible to defend against them. But at this moment, Yi Anshan was not interested in questioning what that creature was or its methods. He simply gazed into the distance. This was not the time to uncover the truth. The more terrifying threat lurked among the monsters, which had almost become a fact. However, what was more concerning at this moment was the precarious situation of Fengtian. Outside the Fengtian survivor base, there was not just one level 5 creature, but several. Due to the enormous size of level 5 mutated creatures, they attracted many other monsters. And killing one could provoke a riot among the entire group surrounding the survivor base. Moreover, recklessly attacking the level 5 creatures could drive them into a frenzy, potentially causing unpredictable impacts on the defense line of the Fengtian survivor base. The level 5 mutated creatures had the capability to easily crush the outer defense line of the survivor base. With their size, a single charge could breach the urban area. The siege by the monsters at the Fengtian survivor base had been ongoing for quite some time. If not handled, it was partly due to the significant losses that could result from reckless extermination, and partly because there were too many monsters, making successful extermination unlikely, which could lead to them breaching the urban area. Fortunately, most of these monsters lacked intelligence and acted like wild beasts. Under the advice and arrangements from the research center, the military adopted a strategy of mainly driving them away while conducting small-scale exterminations, treating them like ferocious wild animals. Anyone who approached would be driven away. Ultimately, these mutated creatures are just more powerful animals. This is equally effective for level 5 beings, which is why both sides have been able to maintain such a long-lasting peace. The military's research and hunting of level 5 monsters also involves searching for creatures in the wilderness outside the survivor base, all to avoid disrupting this delicate balance. The military seeks not only to eliminate the threat of monsters, but also to ensure the safe development of the survivor base and the safety of countless survivors. The Army's duty is not to kill monsters, but to protect the absolute safety of the people without taking any risks. There are numerous monsters surrounding the city, and their numbers continue to grow, making any disturbance a potential trigger for wider chaos. For safety reasons, the military can only reinforce defenses layer by layer and dare not open fire recklessly. The military's firepower could wipe out monsters on a large scale, even bombarding level 5 mutated beings, but the resulting commotion, collateral damage from bombings, and the chain reaction of large-scale monster uprisings would undoubtedly pose an unprecedented crisis for countless survivors within the base. Historically, the approach to the monsters gathering around the survivor base has been to conduct small-scale, slow eliminations, carefully targeting higher-level monsters, preparing to clear them gradually over time. Thus, the gunfire heard within the survivor base has been continuous, not only driving away the attacking mutated creatures, but also cautiously and slowly clearing the surrounding monsters. Abrasive methods are not advisable, hence, gentle and safe approaches have become the preferred choice. According to previous estimates, the outer monster groups surrounding the survivor base would be completely cleared within a year at the latest, a plan that has been repeatedly verified and confirmed as feasible. However, it is evident that some force does not wish for the survivor base to develop steadily and safely. At this moment, the substance injected into the level 5 giant turtle not only caused it to mutate rapidly, but also drove it into a frenzied state, howling as it broke through the defenses, completely shattering this balance. The last cloud impact had also brought considerable trouble to the survivor base, but fortunately, the breach was not large, and no heavy mutated creatures surged in. It was quickly sealed, maintaining the defense. However now, not only has this giant turtle transformed into a level 6 mutated being, but all the monsters surrounding the survivor base have begun to tremble. This level 6 mutated creature has already entered. Other level 5 beings in the surrounding area are all rushing towards this side, flooding into the city through the massive breach created by the giant turtle. The gap cannot be sealed off in a short time. Since the establishment of the survivor base, the greatest crisis has erupted at this moment. Someone clearly does not want the survivor base to progress steadily and is trying to escalate the situation. In this unprecedented crisis, who is responsible becomes less important. What matters is whether they can hold the survivor base and ensure the safety of hundreds of thousands of people in the city. No one noticed that Yi Anshan's fist clenched slowly behind him, his knuckles turning a bit pale. At this moment, those above were worried about how to resist the invasion of monsters, while the survivor base below was already in a state of panic and chaos. In the west area of the survivor base, a large number of survivors were frantically fleeing towards other regions, and the living quarters in other areas were also in disarray. Su Xinghai and Yu Jixing looked down from the building and saw survivors pouring out of several nearby buildings, with some hurriedly searching for vehicles to escape without knowing where to go, just needing to move. Others were desperately trying to loot and burn, and a group even rushed into the building where Ma Tian was. It was complete chaos. Everyone had experienced the brutality of the apocalypse and was no longer as sluggish as they were when the disaster first broke out. As soon as the signs of great calamity appeared, everyone showed their skills, desperately trying to survive. Even though the monsters were still in the west area, diagonally opposite from their position in the east area, it didn't matter. Even Ma Tian and the others were running. They had killed anyone who dared to rob them. Ma Tian took the lead, charging in, and at that moment, a deafening roar echoed above them as a rock the size of a truck was suddenly thrown from the west area, crashing down on a nearby residential building, which instantly collapsed. The screams and cries from inside were horrifying, with many people crushed to death on the spot, without even a sound. In an instant, screams and chaos merged into one. The survivor base was plunged into unprecedented turmoil. Su Xinghai slowly withdrew his gaze, glanced at Yu Jixing, who was looking at him with a terrified expression, and said in a deep voice, "We need to move too." Chapter 167. Suppression at the survivor base. Thick smoke billowed from the distance, and the heavy sounds of artillery fire mixed with the howls of monsters. This scene was reminiscent of the night the apocalypse first broke out, but it was even more terrifying now. The horde of monsters surged in like a flood through the breach created by the 6th-level mutated giant turtle. Military troops swarmed through the streets, advancing towards the west area, and the sound of artillery was deafening, while the sky echoed with the thunderous roar of fighter jets flying overhead. At this moment, Su Xinghai made a decision. They could not stay in the building. If disaster struck, they would be trapped inside, unable to escape, just like the survivors in the building that had just collapsed, becoming unfortunate victims crushed to death. Yu Jixing agreed with Su Xinghai's suggestion, and the people in the building began to make their way downstairs. Su Xinghai took the parents of Wang Cheng and urgently evacuated downstairs, while Xiaqin and others also busied themselves, quickly transporting the supplies they had placed upstairs down. When they reached the ground floor, the community was even more chaotic, with survivors rushing out of the enclosed community, while on the other side, Ma Tian and others were crossing half the community to come over. Ma Tian found Su Xinghai and asked, "Where's Wang Cheng? What should we do now?" Ma Tian was unaware of Wang Cheng's departure from the survivor base in Fengtian. He was also filled with anxiety and unease. At this moment, he approached with the hope that Wang Cheng's connection to the research center might provide some insider information. Compared to the significant background of the research center, Ma Tian and his group were nothing but small potatoes. In times of crisis, they were equally lost and fearful, hoping to latch onto a bigger figure for survival. Su Xinghai glanced at Ma Tian, not being foolish himself. He could clearly see Ma Tian's intention to cling to them. He didn't disclose the exact situation, merely stating, "Wang Cheng is under military deployment and has gone out. Let us wait here for now." Su only mentioned that Wang Cheng was deployed by the military, without specifying the time or destination. Ma Tian naturally assumed he had been called away temporarily. He thought to himself, Wang Cheng is indeed a key figure at the research center, having performed remarkably in the defense of Fengtian. He must be a protected individual. Good. We'll wait here, and I'll protect you. Su Xinghai looked at him and nodded, saying, "Don't speak carelessly." On the side, Yu Jisheng was alarmed. He was much older than Su Xinghai, but lacked his bravery. He knew that Ma Tian was a tough character and had previously been at odds with them. Now, if he learned that Wang Cheng had been deployed from Fengtian, who knew what might happen? Far from a peaceful coexistence, he could even turn against them, his old foes. However, he didn't expect Su Xinghai to manage to persuade Ma Tian so easily, leading him to volunteer for their protection. Wang Cheng was indeed a notable figure, and Su Xinghai was no ordinary person either, though he usually kept a low profile. Yu Jisheng sighed in his heart, remaining silent but smiling and nodding at Ma Tian. The west and east areas of the Fengtian survivor base were located diagonally from each other. The west area had seen fierce battles and was relatively far from the current location. The east area was chaotic among survivors, causing quite a disturbance. Those who managed to enter the Fengtian survivor base were mostly experienced in survival amidst the apocalypse, and their alertness to danger was evident. As soon as danger emerged, they would scatter like cats with their tails stepped on, each fleeing for their lives, fearing that a moment's delay could lead to being trapped in the chaos. This was the helplessness and sorrow of ordinary survivors. With everyone on edge, many in Su Xinghai's group were also filled with anxiety. Su Xinghai wasn't sure if his choices were right. He had subtly become the leader of the current group, pacing in front with cold sweat in his palms. He kept his ears perked, listening to the distant sounds, continuously sending Zhang Chao to higher ground to assess the situation, ensuring he wouldn't miss the opportunity to make the next decision. Zhang Chao was somewhat panicked as well, whispering, "Brother, that level 6 mutated creature is terrifying. Are we just going to wait here?" If the military could hold their ground, they wouldn't need to flee. Running around would only bring unnecessary losses and dangers. If the military couldn't hold out, they had to run quickly. If they were slow, they would all perish. The key was to make a clear judgment. Once they realized they couldn't hold, immediate action was necessary. So, third, make a few more trips and observe closely. Su Xinghai appeared calm on the surface, and his tone was extremely composed, showing no signs of the tension within. Zhang Chao swallowed hard and nodded. "I understand. I'll continue to observe. When do you think our second brother will be back?" Su Xinghai shook his head and replied, "I don't know. He went with the military and hasn't informed us about what he's doing. But being sent so far means it's something important. Our job is to protect our people and supplies while he's away." This chaos did not last long. In the distance, heavy artillery fired from the west side of the survivor base, shaking the very ground, while close to the east side, gunfire erupted shortly after. A group of survivors that had just rushed out was quickly driven back. Ma Tian believed that Wang Cheng and Su Xinghai were his support, and he was eager to prove himself, so he immediately sent out his subordinates to scout the situation. They returned to report to Su Xinghai. It seems the security team in the east is suppressing those fleeing survivors to maintain order. The members of the security teams in various areas included a few from the pre-apocalypse police system, but most were recruited from ordinary survivors. They struggled to form any significant combat capability against the monsters. Therefore, instead of being sent to reinforce the west side, they began to suppress the panicking and fleeing survivors within their own areas. The chaos they created had already disrupted the rhythm of the overall defense at the survivor base, causing casualties among themselves as well. Stampedes and accidents unfolded within less than 10 minutes. Although the monsters had not breached other areas from the west, the survivors were in disarray. Amidst the turmoil, many injuries occurred. Orders were quickly issued from the command center. employing special measures during this critical time to forcibly drive the chaotic survivors back to their residential areas and maintain calm. However, due to the urgent situation within the survivor base, the orders aimed at keeping the survivors rational were poorly executed. The members of the security teams took advantage of the opportunity, shoving ordinary survivors while seizing their supplies. Armed with guns, they pushed into the crowd, taking advantage of their identities and official duties to act brazenly. While driving the survivors away, they looted their belongings. Su Xinghai and the others witnessed a group of ordinary survivors who had just rushed out, being driven back by a security team clad in black uniforms. The team members shouted as they used batons to push and hit people, frantically snatching items from the ordinary survivors. A woman suddenly knelt down at the feet of a member of the security team, tightly clutching a package and shouting, "Don't take my things, that's our food. Without it we'll starve." The security team member paused for a moment, seeming a bit hesitant. But just then, another tall member of the security team approached and struck the woman hard on the head with a baton. She fell down without making a sound, and he yanked the package from her arms, weighing it in his hands and spitting, "Damn, you treat this little thing like treasure. Do you even know we're saving your lives? What's wrong with taking some of your stuff?" Seeing this, Su Xinghai felt a slight tremor in his heart. These people seemed to be the real and most vicious thugs at that moment, even worse than Ma Tian. However, Zhang Chao, who was standing higher up, could no longer bear to watch. His straightforward personality and explosive temper led him to shout angrily, "Is this what you call saving people? You've taken all their belongings and beaten them like this. Do you even deserve these uniforms?" As soon as he said this, the tall security member immediately looked up, coldly staring at him. The other members of the security team also turned their heads, their expressions unfriendly. Su Xinghai felt a jolt in his heart. This was bad. Chapter 168. They are coming for us. There were more than a dozen members of the security team here, led by the same tall man who had just knocked out the unfortunate woman, his baton still dripping with blood. He cast a menacing glance their way, causing the surrounding members of the security team to stop what they were doing and look over. The survivors, who had been driven away and robbed, hurried deeper into the buildings. Not far away, the battle in the west zone of the survivor base was fierce, but in this corner, there was a brief, eerie silence. Zhang Chao realized he had misspoken upon seeing this scene. His straightforward nature meant he wasn't afraid of these people, but he knew this wasn't just about him. Standing there, he felt a bit trapped. Su Xinghai quickly stepped forward and pulled Zhang Chao back. Su Xinghai, not wanting to escalate the situation, forced a smile and said, "Sorry. We didn't mean it that way. We weren't running around." The tall security team member stepped closer, scanning the area, and persisted, "What? Do you want to disrupt our law enforcement?" Zhang Chao's face showed anger again at these words, clearly wanting to say that this was outright robbery. However, Su Xinghai noticed his little movements and shot him a glare, causing Zhang Chao to immediately quiet down. Although they were of different ages, Su Xinghai, as the leader, always carried himself like one. Zhang Chao respected him, and after being glared at, he quickly settled down, swallowing back the impulsive words he wanted to say. At that moment, Ma Tian also hurried over to speak with the tall security team member. He was clearly preparing to use his backer, Old Xia, to intimidate the other party and drive them away. However, this time, it seemed that his influence was not as effective as before. In the chaos, the group that had arrived here did not take Xie Dongin seriously at all. One tall member of the security team even sneered, "What is Xie Dongin to me? I don't care who you are. Even if you are from the research center or a subordinate of Deputy Yi, it doesn't matter. We are a team directly under the East District leadership. I see you as the culprits causing chaos among these ordinary survivors. Come on, take them all down and load their belongings onto our vehicles." A twisted expression appeared on Ma Tian's face. He was not someone easy to deal with. He had been polite to Wang Cheng and others because he knew their strength and background were quite impressive. Now, not only had this security team member disrespected him, but he was also brazenly attempting to rob them. Unable to hold back, he coldly said, "Let's see who dares to move." Usually, this group of security personnel wouldn't be so arrogant. This time, they were clearly trying to take advantage of the chaos caused by the serious situation at the survivor base to loot and fill their own pockets. They acted recklessly, knowing it was chaotic everywhere. The core military forces and the attention from higher-ups were all focused on the battlefield in the west district of the survivor base, leaving little concern for the situation in these small areas. Su Xinghai and Yu Jixing exchanged glances but remained silent. They understood the source of the arrogance of these security team members at this moment. Strictly speaking, they did have connections with the research center and Deputy Yi, but in such a chaotic situation, those connections were of no use. When order breaks down, who knows who has harmed whom? In the end, when accountability is pursued, it would be impossible to identify anyone. Therefore, they remained quiet, taking advantage of Ma Tian's presence. But the tall security team member was still relentless, and instead, Ma Tian's response provoked him further, saying, "You're asking for death. As he spoke, he raised his baton, intending to strike Ma Tian. But who was Ma Tian? He was the leader of the survivors in this small area and also an awakened one. He wouldn't do anything unless provoked. And seeing that this person dared to attack him, he immediately retaliated. The tall security member, despite his imposing figure, was just an ordinary person. He was no match for an awakened individual like Ma Tian. Once Ma Tian struck, he was sent flying, collapsing to the ground, unconscious. The other members of the security team were terrified and quickly fled with him. The other survivors, who had just been bullied by them, all showed grateful expressions. This was one of the few times Ma Tian was appreciated by ordinary survivors, and he felt a strange sensation in his heart. Or perhaps it was a sense of accomplishment. It felt as if he was not just the leader of this area, but also the guardian of its order. It stemmed from a peculiar sense of responsibility and achievement. However, this feeling for Ma Tian quickly dissipated as he thought about the situation and realized that something was off. He soon found Su Xinghai and said, "This situation isn't right, brother. Those security personnel were likely coming for us." With this reminder from Ma Tian, Su Xinghai also recognized the anomaly. Ma Tian was a local veteran and with connections to a certain influential figure, even amidst the chaos. The security personnel should have shown some respect. Even if they were to drive them away or seize their belongings, they shouldn't have come onto Ma Tian's territory. With this in mind, Su Xinghai narrowed his eyes slightly. Ma Tian and his group had been dominating the area, with ample resources, even managing to obtain boxes of fruit. It was possible that someone higher up had taken an interest in his goods and resources, planning to take advantage of the chaos at the survivor base to seize everything. As it turned out, this was indeed the case. Not 10 minutes after the previous group of security personnel left, 3 vehicles drove in from outside. One of the vehicles even had a heavy machine gun mounted on it, aimed right at Ma Tian and his group. A tall, thin man emerged from the vehicle, coldly stating, "You are the ones who just assaulted the security personnel? Take them all into custody and confiscate their belongings." Following that, more than 10 armed individuals jumped down, surrounding them completely. The faces of Ma Tian and his group changed dramatically. Su Xinghai, however, remained calm and stepped back. While Ma Tian wanted to curry favor with them and the influential figure, Su Xinghai was not so easily swayed. He had not forgotten that the last group of survivors that caused trouble was instigated by Ma Tian, and although Wang Qi's leg was fine, Su Xinghai was not one to easily overlook such matters. Ma Tian's flashy actions had drawn attention, and it was his own trouble. By distancing themselves now, they could remain worry-free. However, Su Xinghai clearly underestimated the greed of this group. The tall, thin man's gaze swept over and quickly spotted the unshipped supplies belonging to Su Xinghai's group, especially the 2 beautiful women, Xiaqin and Su Ling, standing among them. A glint of greed appeared in his eyes as he said, "Are you all with them? Take them all into custody." Yu Jisheng was taken aback by this and hurriedly tried to distance himself from Ma Tian, but Su Xinghai blocked him. Su Xinghai could see clearly from the look in the tall man's eyes what their true intent was. It was not because of their association with Ma Tian. Anger surged within Su Xinghai, but being a calm and rational person, he stepped forward and said, "If you want to take people, go ahead and try." On the other side, Ma Tian's eyes flickered. He couldn't figure out who was targeting him, but at this moment, getting Su Xinghai and Wang Cheng on his side would be beneficial. He quickly chimed in, "I advise you to think this through. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. Do you know who is backing us?" The prominent figure from the research center, Ma Tian, had not finished speaking when the tall, thin man laughed as if he had heard a joke. "A prominent figure from the research center? Then why are you still here? Heh, enough with the nonsense. Take them all down and pack these things along with those 2 women separately. And you're an awakened one, aren't you? Try moving again." With his words, the members of the security team in black uniforms behind him sprang into action, and the heavy machine gun set up at the back turned its muzzle, aiming directly at Ma Tian. However, as they moved, the first person in front was knocked down by a water arrow. Su Xinghai stepped forward, standing in front of everyone, and the machine gun instantly redirected towards them. Wang Cheng was not present, and Su Xinghai asked himself if he was the leader of the dormitory. Even though there were many older individuals around, they could not adapt to the current times, so Su Xinghai understood that it was his time to take charge, and he could not back down. Until now, he had been retreating to avoid escalating the conflict, as he lacked confidence and feared causing losses on their side. But now, at this moment, Su Xinghai had no choice. Moreover, he could not retreat. With Wang Cheng absent, he had to protect these people and the team. This was a responsibility he had long defined for himself, although he had been under Wang Cheng's protection during this time. Su Xinghai still felt that even though Wang Cheng had become very powerful, as the leader of the dormitory, he had the obligation to protect Zhang Chao, Wang Cheng, and their families with all his might, and there was no way he could back down. Therefore, at this moment, with the dark muzzle of the machine gun pointed at him, Su Xinghai, a mere first-level awakened one, showed no fear on his face. He knew that in the chaotic situation of a collapsed societal system, it was useless to bring up anyone's background. If he scared the other side, they might retaliate even more fiercely to silence him. Thus, Su Xinghai did not say anything more and directly stated, "You can kill me if you want, but believe me, if you dare to act, none of you will leave here today." Chapter 169. Discovery of Unregistered Aircraft. Su Xinghai's palms were sweating with tension. In truth, he did not know how to respond to the current situation. He realized that no matter what, resorting to violence was not the best choice, and bringing up backgrounds would be useless. He recalled how Wang Cheng had intimidated Ma Tian before, exchanging life for life. "If you dare to touch me, I'll make sure your blood spills." In a doomsday scenario, those with status and identity were often the most afraid of death. The security team members, taking advantage of the chaos to seize these items and women, were only doing so to enjoy life, right? What good would it do them to be dead? They must be afraid of death and would hesitate to act. Of course, Su Xinghai did not dare to act either. There were many tough characters on Ma Tian's side. While his own team consisted mainly of ordinary survivors, mostly weak and elderly, and he could not afford to suffer casualties. Ma Tian was also a clever person. He quickly reacted and led his followers, including Xiao Li, forward. He couldn't help but cast a doubtful glance at Su Xinghai. He thought that everyone in Wang Qing's team, apart from Wang Qing himself, was useless, but he didn't expect that with Wang Qing absent, someone would step up who reacted so swiftly and decisively. As expected, when they advanced, the expressions of the security team and the tall, thin man changed. As members of the security team, their status was far above that of ordinary survivors, and they were used to wielding power. They didn't really dare to engage in a fight. To them, the lives of these ordinary survivors were insignificant, but their own lives and futures were precious. If they lost everything in a fight, wouldn't that be a huge loss for them? The tall, thin man's gaze shifted back and forth between Su Xinghai and Ma Tian, saying, "Have you thought this through? If you dare to challenge us, the first to die will be the two of you leading the charge." Although the tall man felt a bit uneasy inside, his expression remained fierce. As Ma Tian had guessed, this group of security team members was well prepared, otherwise, in the midst of chaos. How could someone have come in so quickly after Ma Tian had just struck someone? There were people above him who wanted to take this opportunity to eliminate the influence of the survivors in this area and seize the large number of beautiful women and resources they controlled. The tall man had backing, which gave him confidence and made him less willing to back down. His words pressured Su Xinghai and Ma Tian, betting that as the leaders of their respective teams, they wouldn't want to die here. At this moment, the survivors behind Yu Jisheng, as well as Xiao Li and others, began to feel tense. Wang Qi and Yuan Rui stepped forward to shield Wang Qing's parents behind them. Faced with this threat, Ma Tian's face clearly showed a moment of hesitation. The other side had guessed correctly. As a leader, how could he bear to die? Only Su Xinghai remained unfazed, even stepping forward despite the dark muzzle of the machine gun pointed at him, saying, "You can give it a try." As the saying goes, the recklessly bold fear the desperate, and the desperate fear the reckless. The tall, thin man broke into a cold sweat. He truly feared someone who was reckless. However, he had a mission to accomplish and was stuck in a situation where he couldn't advance or retreat, making it difficult to proceed. Thus, both sides remained in a peculiar standoff. In the distance, the sound of gunfire echoed from the Fengtian survivor base. In every corner of the base, regardless of whether they encountered monsters, every survivor struggled to survive, either fighting against natural disasters or human threats. In this apocalypse, monsters were never humanity's greatest threat. Meanwhile, at the command center of the Fengtian survivor base, Yi Anshan had entered the underground command center of the building under heavy protection. Before going underground, he paused and issued an order for his guards to send someone to escort Wang Qing's family and friends to safety. The other officials around were quite surprised. Many people are hearing the name Wang Cheng for the first time and are unaware of who he is, yet in such circumstances, he could still be remembered by Deputy Yi, who specifically sent someone to arrange for his family and friends. Yi Anshan's guards immediately mobilized personnel to set out. But the internal situation at the survivor base in Fengtian was chaotic, making it difficult to smoothly reach the eastern district to find people. As for his arrangements and the confusion surrounding him, along with speculations about Wang Cheng's identity, Yi Anshan showed no intention of responding. That was his promise to Wang Cheng. Although he had elements of using Wang Cheng and didn't fully trust that young man, he was determined to uphold his commitment. Subsequently, Yi Anshan proceeded downward to the underground command center to oversee the overall battlefield situation. At this moment, all military units at the Fengtian survivor base were mobilized, with infantry coordinating with armored troops to advance along the entire line. Fighter jets bombed at low altitude, recklessly and without concern for resources, and within a short time. At the cost of nearly burning down the western district of the survivor base, they forcefully blocked the flood-like impact of the monster horde from the breach. From the images returned by drones and on-site troops, the western district of the survivor base, which had been peaceful less than an hour ago, was now in ruins, with smoke rising from the ground and human and mutated creature corpses scattered everywhere. However, the modern armed forces of humanity displayed their true combat capabilities here. Regardless of how terrifying the monsters looked or how unbelievable their attack patterns were, in the face of the military's armored forces advancing like an iron tide, the result was nothing but a mass of blood and flesh. Heavy artillery roared, and machine guns fired wildly. A 130mm tank cannon could collapse half of a multi-story residential building with a single shot, let alone the flesh and blood of monsters. Even the most terrifying and massive creatures find it hard to possess a structure as solid as steel and concrete. Especially under the coordinated command of the Fengtian General Headquarters, the troops were frequently mobilized, and their deployment was tight, forming a large encirclement on the outskirts of the Western District, tightening inward to combat the incoming monsters. After deciding to abandon the infrastructure of the Western District, the military was able to fully unleash its capabilities. Many people do not understand the combat power of the military under modern weaponry and warfare systems. The military does not fear the monster horde. Even the terrifying blood-red monsters that occupied the entire Sea City area could be annihilated with the right means. In theory, a small-yield nuclear bomb could eliminate them. However, this is humanity's planet and home, and the military faces many constraints. Moreover, the chaos at the beginning of the apocalypse had a significant impact on the military. Local small-scale units were ineffective, and many unfortunately perished under the chaos and numerical advantage of the monsters. In the rush, this led to considerable casualties, resulting in a significant reduction in the ranks of military personnel. However, once the military gathers and unites its forces, it becomes a formidable force that these monsters cannot withstand. This is why the military had previously not taken these monstrous groups seriously, according to optimistic estimates, under the circumstances at that time. After humanity underwent significant changes and regained its footing, it would only take a little time to recover and launch a counteroffensive wave, relying on the powerful violence of its military system to reclaim control over the world. However, what was unexpected was that this apocalyptic scenario involved not just terrifying mutations sweeping across the globe. Yi Anshan stared at the central screen, suppressing the chaotic thoughts in his mind, and issued orders in an orderly manner. Some of their troops had already begun attacking the 6th-level mutated creature, but the progress was slow. The 6th-level mutated creature was terrifying. Its massive size and the heavy shell on its back possessed unimaginable defensive capabilities. Armor-piercing rounds could only create a dent, which was insignificant compared to its gigantic form, and it was rampaging around, causing buildings to collapse and groups of soldiers to be crushed to death. The threat it posed far exceeded that of conventional 5th-level mutated creatures. If it charged into other areas, they would have difficulty effectively stopping it, and the survivor base could not bear such a cost. Therefore, under Yi Anshan's command, the military had been trying to attract its attention, using continuous artillery fire and lives to keep its movements confined to the Western District, minimizing the scale of losses. The survivor base was concentrating all its forces on encircling this creature and the many mutated beings, temporarily losing the ability to manage and coordinate other areas. With limited personnel, they could not handle everything at once. Yi Anshan was a decisive commander. He knew he could not let the threat in the Western District continue to grow. Even if those security teams caused trouble in other areas, as long as the survivors were alive, that was what mattered. In special times, extraordinary measures were necessary sacrifices. Yi Anshan had to act from a higher perspective to protect the interests of the majority. However, this 6th-level mutated creature was somewhat tricky, and even he was unsure where to start. Not only did he initiate missile bombardments and air force strikes, but he also organized groups of ground assault soldiers, attempting to infiltrate the gaps created by the creature's expanding size and the blood and flesh of the internal monsters. Yet the result was repeated failures. It was a terrifying giant ravaging the city, capable of swatting down military aircraft with a single swipe, and any movement would crush the assault soldiers en masse. At that moment, an officer suggested using cloud explosives. According to observations from the research center, cloud explosives might be able to breach its shell. Before Yi Anshan could respond, a military advisor interjected with a rebuttal. Cloud explosives must not be used. Detonating them in the Western District would affect all survivors inside the base, who were unprepared and untrained. This would be a tactic of inflicting 1,000 losses on the enemy while suffering 800 of their own. It must not be employed. The officer countered, asking, "Then what should we do? Should we sacrifice lives instead? Deputy Yi, please issue the command." Yi Anshan raised his head, deeply furrowing his brow. Inside the survivor base in Fengtian, he was the visible leader and the highest military commander on site, but he knew this was not his personal kingdom. He did not have absolute authority. Even if he wanted to use cloud explosion bombs, he had to seek approval from superiors. as this exceeded the scope of conventional weapon usage. Moreover, as the expert had pointed out, the impact of cloud explosion bombs on ordinary survivors could not be ignored. Whoever made the decision must take responsibility for it. However, before Yi Anshan could say anything, an intelligence officer in the corner suddenly reported, "Commander, we have detected an unregistered aircraft, and its model and parameters do not match any of our region's aircraft. The target cannot be identified." This brand new information instantly captured everyone's attention in the room. Chapter 170. First, fire a shot. More information was being relayed. The aircraft was rapidly approaching from the direction of Haicheng, with no registration within the military district of the Fengtian survivor base. Most critically, this aircraft had a dark, cold appearance, with its thrusters emitting dazzling flashes, and its model was a completely new type that could not match any aerial device in our region. The search range was expanded, and even within the entire Federation, there was no aircraft of this model. This conclusion made the high-ranking officials and military advisors in the command center change their expressions. Is it our aircraft? Is it a civilian modified plane? Or a secret military aircraft crafted by a wealthy consortium? This is definitely not a federal aircraft. Then whose is it? What is its purpose? Many began to harbor terrifying suspicions, doubting that this aircraft originated from a bizarre creature that had activated level 5 biological mutations and reached level 6. Various signs indicated that among the monsters, there was a group of intelligent beings with certain technologies, hindering our efforts. Could it be that they had developed to the point of possessing such an aircraft? From the current situation, the performance exhibited by this suddenly intruding aircraft in the airspace of the Fengtian survivor base was exceptional, far beyond what conventional civilian self-built aircraft could compare to, with speed and power surpassing even the performance of the military's regular squadron fighter jets. The situation kept changing, and many military advisors showed signs of fear. They had to admit that the world before them was becoming unfamiliar, and what truly unsettled them was not the terrifying monsters in front of them, but the surging power hidden beneath the shadows obscured by the dense monster crowd. No one knew what that power was or how far it had developed. The unknown often brings immense fear to people. Yi Anshan, however, was the first to issue a command. Immediately dispatch 2 fighter jets to intercept, inquire who they are. If they cannot answer truthfully, open fire immediately and intercept and shoot down the aircraft outside Fengtian. If identity cannot be confirmed, destroy it directly to eliminate the threat. However, accompanied by the interception inquiries from 2 fighter jets, the aircraft quickly responded, but the content of the response left Yi Anshan visibly shocked, because the pilot of this aircraft turned out to be Wang Cheng. Inside the aircraft were the members of the Pingfengtian operation team. Information about a suspected battle breaking out in the direction of Pingfengtian had already reached Yi Anshan's desk several hours earlier, but they hadn't had time to react before the survivor base faced an attack. With no choice, Yi Anshan couldn't divert troops to check and had prepared for the worst-case scenario, considering abandoning the members of the Pingfengtian operation team. In comparison, the survivor base and the hundreds of thousands of survivors here were undoubtedly more important. But who would have thought? The abandoned members of the Pingfengtian operation team actually flew back in an aircraft not belonging to the Federation. Yi Anshan's first reaction was that it might be a deception. He personally connected with Xu Bing and Zhang Tsongtong in the aircraft. Before their departure, Yi Anshan had given them each a secret code. If it were a fake, they wouldn't be able to answer. However, the results were beyond his expectations. Yi Anshan personally tested and verified, confirming that the members in this aircraft were indeed from the Pingfengtian operation team. A look of shock appeared on Yi Anshan's face. The others in the operations center exchanged glances in disbelief. As Yi Anshan gazed at the dark, cold aircraft on the screen, he felt an increasing sense of familiarity. This aircraft was strikingly similar to the one recorded previously by the survivor base, which had appeared twice outside the base, eliminating level 5 mutated creatures. Each time, there were changes. Moreover, why was the pilot Wang Cheng? Yi Anshan suppressed the countless questions and surprises surging within him and immediately issued orders. Speaking rapidly, cross-reference this aircraft's data with the records of the previous 2 aircraft and see if there are any similarities. Then instruct those 2 fighter jets to change their mission from interception to escort, as they are bringing back important information from Pingfengtian. Escort them to a safe area first. And they must not leave their aircraft for now. We will discuss the rest later. The soldiers below quickly received the orders. Since communication had been established, Yi Anshan's command could directly reach Wang Cheng's warship. Although surprised, Yi Anshan was still clear about the urgency of the situation. He understood that the most important task now was to resolve the crisis at the survivor base and deal with that level 6 mutated creature. Everything else could wait until after that was settled. Otherwise, it would be meaningless if the survivor base was finished while they were preoccupied with Pingfengtian. However, to Yi Anshan's surprise, in response to his command, Wang Cheng in the aircraft sent a request. I will first reach the command center building in the central district of the survivor base to drop off Zhang Songtong's team and ensure their safety. I do not wish to retreat outside the battlefield and wait. I request to engage in combat and eliminate that level 6 mutated creature. This news caused an uproar in the command center. Who was this Wang Cheng? Had he lost his mind? There was no runway in front of the building for him to land on. How could he possibly land? Did his aircraft have vertical takeoff and landing capabilities? How could that be? Did he still intend to join the battle? Several people's gazes involuntarily fell upon Yi Anshan, recalling that he had just ordered his guards to protect the family and friends of the pilot named Wang Cheng. Yi Anshan also had many doubts in his heart, but after a moment of silence, he said, approved. He knew that his doubts were not important at this moment. This astonishing aircraft was not as crucial to the overall situation. They should not waste too much time on it. Confirming that the aircraft was friendly rather than hostile was enough. What Wang Cheng wanted to do was up to him. The rest could be discussed once everything settled down. Meanwhile, in midair, Wang Cheng's aircraft was speeding across the airspace of the western battlefield. The sight before him was alarming. The land was ablaze, and enormous monsters were howling as they advanced, striking fear even in him. He had not anticipated that returning to the survivor base in Fengtian would reveal such a scene. What was once considered a safe haven had now become a city on the brink of destruction. However, amidst his shock, Wang Cheng quickly realized that this was also a tremendous opportunity for him. His resolve to fight stemmed from the high energy value of the level 6 mutated creature. Killing it would yield 5,000 energy points. It's worth noting that upgrading his battleship from level 5 to level 6 required a total of only 10,000 energy points. By taking down this level 6 mutated creature, he could easily acquire half of that energy. So, wasn't a level 6 battleship within reach? The key point was that the military was still actively engaging it. Coordinating with the military to eliminate this level 6 mutated creature would undoubtedly increase his chances of success. Such an opportunity was not one Wang Cheng could afford to miss. Of course, he was also well aware of his mission. Ensuring the safety of Zhang Songtong and the other experts was crucial. He needed to get them to a safe place. After receiving permission, he surged forward, but he did not head directly to the Joint Defense Command Center in the Central District. Instead, he was heading towards the Eastern District. The level 6 mutated creature and the safety of experts like Zhang Songtong were important, but his family was even more so. Given the chaos in Fengtian's survivor base, how could Wang Cheng remain calm? Naturally, he wanted to check on the situation of his family and Su Xinghai first. This was his greatest concern amidst the turmoil, as he feared something might happen to them. Although the eastern and western districts were diagonally positioned, and he would have to pass through the central district, Wang Cheng did not plan to drop off Zhang Songtong and the others first. Instead, he pressed on to take a quick look. The pilots of the escorting fighter jets expressed their dissatisfaction, informing Wang Cheng that he was seriously off course. However, Wang Cheng did not heed them. His battleship was exceptional in performance, and the two fighter jets could not stop him. He flew ahead, skimming low. The roar of the aircraft drawing the attention of countless survivors and security team members who looked up in awe. At this moment, in the residential area of the royal city, the guards sent by Yi Anshan had just arrived. Seeing the tense situation, they began to inquire. The tall, thin man was terrified, not expecting that they just wanted to take advantage of the chaos to rob, especially during such a citywide crisis, and ended up targeting such a prominent figure. He had just questioned why no one came to meet them despite having connections. And now the guards personally assigned by Deputy Yi had arrived. The tall, thin man no longer showed any of his earlier arrogance and aggression. Cold sweat dripped down his face as he stepped back with the people behind him. Although his companions dared to act recklessly in the Eastern District, in front of Deputy Yi, they were like ants compared to an elephant. In stark contrast, Ma Tian was almost overflowing with excitement. He hadn't expected that they not only had connections with the research center, but also with Deputy Yi. Little Li quietly remarked, "This is simply outrageous. The research center is one thing, but now Deputy Yi himself has sent someone to meet them. This is incredible." Ma Tian kept signaling the tall, thin man with his eyes, provoking him further. The tall, thin man dared not utter another word, his face only displaying forced smiles and apologies, not even daring to take a deep breath. On the other side, Yu Jisheng and the others also breathed a sigh of relief. Su Xinghai, who was usually reserved, felt relieved as the situation shifted in their favor. Su Ling excitedly said, "I knew Uncle Yi wouldn't ignore us." The guard, diligent in his duties, did not wish to cause unnecessary trouble. After briefly understanding the situation, he decided not to confront the tall, thin man and his group right away. Instead, he prepared to first evacuate important figures like Su Xinghai and Su Ling. While accountability was important, ensuring the safety of those personally arranged by Yi Anshan was paramount. As someone close to Yi Anshan, the guard naturally understood these priorities. Just then, they all heard the roar of aircraft overhead. Looking up, they saw a large, dark, and cold flying vehicles swooping low and speeding through the air. Although it differed from his memories of the royal city's warships, Yu Jisheng recognized it at a glance and excitedly whispered to Su Xinghai, "Is that the royal city brothers returning?" The return of the royal city was even more thrilling than the arrival of Deputy Ye's guards. This was because, while Deputy Yi was an outsider, the royal city felt like their own people, which made a significant difference. The tall, thin man's face turned pale. Did Deputy Yi even send aircraft for protection? However, the terrifying scene that unfolded next left him and the other guards in utter shock. The massive flying vehicle swooped down directly toward them, and without hesitation, it opened fire. Artillery roaring as shells rained down on the guards. The royal city came from the sky, clearly able to assess the situation. These people were evidently confronting Su Xinghai and the others, and regardless of who they were, it was certain they were troublemakers. Given the current chaos in the capital, it was clear they had both the audacity and capability to seek trouble. The people of Wangcheng are in the sky, unable to come down to distinguish the situation. But below are his family and brothers, the most important people to him. He doesn't want this group to harm his own. And he certainly doesn't want to give the enemy any opportunity. Therefore, once he confirmed they were enemies, he decided to take action without hesitation. Thus, Wangcheng swooped down and, without saying a word, fired first. He aimed and shot without delay. This was to intimidate the malicious. The pilots of the two military aircraft following Wangcheng were dumbfounded at this scene. Why did he suddenly open fire? At this moment, due to the intervention of the security team sent by Yi Anshan, the members of the security team, led by the tall, thin man, had already ended the close confrontation with Su Xinghai, Ma Tian, and others. Under the pressure brought by Deputy Yi, they retreated, creating a significant distance. This distance gave Wangcheng the confidence to fire without worrying about collateral damage. In a blinding flash of fire, the tall, thin man and the members of the security team, along with the vehicles behind them and the 12.7mm caliber machine gun that had just been flaunting its power in front of Su Xinghai and others, were all engulfed in flames, reduced to ashes. Everything happened too quickly. Wangcheng's warship dove low, dropped bombs at high speed, and then swiftly pulled up. The parties involved didn't even have time to dodge or scream before being obliterated in the explosion. The others were left in shock. The accompanying fighter jets instantly sent a series of warnings. On the ground, Ma Tian and others exchanged glances, their faces reflecting terror in unison. When they looked at Su Xinghai and others, there was an added layer of fear. Even the soldier from Yi Anshan's security team was astonished. Su Xinghai was also taken aback, but he maintained a calm demeanor. He glanced at Ma Tian and said lightly, "They brought this upon themselves." Hearing this, Ma Tian nearly collapsed to the ground, but fortunately, Xiaoli was quick to support him. The two surviving perpetrators exchanged a glance, both seeing the shock and fear deep in each other's eyes. In this area, they could be considered ruthless and fierce, yet ordinary survivors feared their methods. However, compared to these individuals, their own tactics seemed trivial. Offending them could mean being obliterated by a missile on the spot. They made it look easy, but they were incredibly ruthless. If other ordinary survivors knew Ma Tian's thoughts at that moment, they would be shocked, as they saw him as a complete villain. Yet here he was, fearful of others, considering them brutal. Meanwhile, in the sky, Wangcheng was speeding forward, turning back toward the central area of the Feng Tian survivor base. After completing his attack, he circled around briefly to confirm there were no threats to Su Xinghai and others before continuing onward to the central area. The position of the Eastern District is relatively better, located diagonally from the Western District. There are no monsters here, only man-made disasters. With the presence of the security team from Yian Mountain, the disasters shouldn't affect this area. Su Xinghai and his parents should not have to worry anymore. Wangcheng let out a sigh of relief. As for the inquiries and warnings from the two military fighter jets escorting him, he finally had time to respond. In fact, if he hadn't known that these inquiries were from the Central Command, he wouldn't have bothered to reply. The performance of his warship far exceeded that of the two conventional military aircraft escorting him. If he wanted to, he could shake them off in an instant. Wangcheng replied, "They threatened me, so I dealt with them on the spot." This response was quite imposing, and when it reached the Central Command, many were taken aback, thinking that this pilot of the unknown aircraft was exceptionally arrogant. However, given the tense situation, no one had time to dwell on it. When Wangcheng arrived at the Central District, he noticed that the defenses had clearly been strengthened, apparently to guard against any rash actions he might take. Fearing he could launch a missile at the Central Command building, armed forces were everywhere, with sanitation crews below the Central Command building. However, this time Wangcheng was quite compliant. As the warship approached, he rapidly lowered its altitude, shut down the thrusters, and used the anti-gravity engine to descend gradually, skillfully hovering just under a meter above the ground, allowing Zhang Chongtong and the others to disembark from the ship. Wangcheng opened the hatch and watched them get off the spacecraft. The military personnel had been protecting the researchers, and now that their mission was over, they all disembarked. Among the remaining awakened soldiers, Zheng Hailong looked at Wang Cheng with a complicated expression before leaving the ship as well. Zhang Chongtong was the last to get off. The wind howled at the survivor base in Feng Tian, and she stood at the edge of the hatch, her long hair flying wildly, giving a unique and tragic apocalyptic vibe. She said, "Research Center, I'll be waiting for you to find me." With that, she jumped off the spacecraft. Despite being a valuable researcher, she was also someone who exercised regularly, so jumping from that height was nothing. Then, Wang Cheng's gaze turned to a corner. There was still one person who had not disembarked, or rather, she was not planning to. Xu Bing leaned against the wall, her expression as cold as frost, silently watching Wang Cheng. He glanced at her with a slight smile, but said nothing, turning to head towards the cockpit. This time, he did not close the cockpit door or seal it. Xu Bing silently followed him inside, and upon seeing the dramatically changed cockpit, a hint of surprise appeared in her eyes. What she found even more incomprehensible was how Wang Cheng managed to make so many changes to the warship in such a short time all by himself. Compared to the last time she sat in his aircraft, this was a tremendous transformation. It could hardly be considered the same model of aircraft anymore. How did he accomplish this? Xu Bing sat down in the back of the cockpit, her gaze inevitably falling on the figure of Wang Cheng ahead. However, the current cockpit of Wang Cheng's vessel was merely a rudimentary form of a battleship bridge. It was not yet capable of allowing personnel to move around freely during high-speed maneuvers, and the space was quite limited. Although the specifications and size of the Level 5 battleship were significantly larger compared to the previous Level 4, in strict data terms, the difference was not that much. The space was still somewhat cramped, which meant that Xu Bing had to find a place to sit. At this moment, Zhang Chongtong and the others had been urgently taken away by the military. They had their own battlefield to fight on and were racing against time. Meanwhile, the armored forces stationed outside the Central Command building remained on high alert, and Wang Cheng did not rush to activate the battleship. Although the military had allowed Wang Cheng's battleship to engage in combat and join the fray, it was necessary to first register the battleship's identification information and input it into the war system. This was to prevent other aircraft and ground armored units from mistakenly targeting it as an enemy. This precaution was essential. In ancient battlefields, blades had no eyes. But in modern warfare, electronic intelligence served as the eyes for distinguishing friend from foe. Now, the Western District was in chaos, with the battlefield being extremely tumultuous and filled with gunfire. The military's firepower was fully suppressive and terrifying. If Wang Cheng were to be mistaken for an enemy and fired upon, no matter how sturdy his battleship was, it would not be able to withstand the onslaught. Yi Anshan had even personally assigned a task to Wang Cheng, asking him to assist in clearing the monsters on the periphery of the Western District. However, Wang Cheng directly refused and submitted a request to engage directly with the Level 6 mutated creatures. This request surprised Yi Anshan. In the command center of the Central Command building, someone even whispered, "Is he crazy? Who is this driver?" Thinking he is the protagonist of a story, wanting to engage directly with Level 6 mutated creatures? On such a battlefield, even if his aircraft is not weak, its impact on the overall situation would be minimal. Everyone was well aware of the ferocity of Level 6 mutated creatures. It was the most dangerous area at present. Anyone who charged in could very likely be lost without a trace. Even their well-trained soldiers could hardly hide their fear. Yet, this Wang Cheng had taken the initiative to volunteer to go to the most perilous place and participate in taking down the Level 6 mutated creature. Yi Anshan couldn't help but recall Professor Chen's earlier words. This Wang Cheng was a lunatic solely focused on combating mutated creatures. It seemed that indeed, this young man's goal was to confront the largest and most formidable Level 6 mutated creature. After some thought, Yi Anshan approved Wang Cheng's request. In fact, it would have made no difference if he had disallowed it. With identification in place, and since Wang Cheng was not part of the military forces, he could act freely. The military's guidance to him was merely a suggestion under the overall coordination of the battle. Thus, Yi Anshan had no reason or ability to interfere with Wang Cheng's own wishes. However, others were not clear about these thoughts. In the command center, many exchanged glances, all believing that this peculiar aircraft had a significant connection with Yi Anshan. At this moment, the identity recognition was finally completed, and with the hum of the anti-gravity engine, the battleship slowly ascended vertically from the ground. Below, a group of armored military units looked up, witnessing the lights of the recently extinguished thrusters at the rear of the battleship ignite one by one. The thrusters were firing up one after another. Inside the battleship, in the cockpit, everything was quite stable. Wang Cheng glanced towards the direction outside of the city, having just arrived near the survivor base. After assessing the situation here, he accelerated, leaving Chun Jigua and others behind. However, Wang Cheng had informed them about the conditions outside, advising them to avoid the area and wait for a better opportunity to enter. After all, Chen Jigua and his team did not have a battleship. Entering the survivor base now would not be a refuge, but could be considered a death wish. Wang Cheng believed that Chen Jigua's intelligence would make him understand the situation, and that they had the capability and means to survive. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made it here from Haiqing. They should be able to hide and withstand this disaster. At this moment, Wang Cheng's gaze shifted to Shubing, their eyes meeting. Shubing asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll uncover your secrets if you let me in?" This wasn't the first time. Wang Cheng smiled and said, "Actually, I need your help. Can you operate a laser cannon?" "What?" A look of confusion crossed Shubing's face. As the battleship ascended, Wang Cheng operated the controls ahead, and soon the screen in front of Shubing, which had just been off, suddenly lit up, revealing a shooting interface resembling a game, but with a real-time background of their surroundings. Shubing was reluctant to leave, not only because it was Yi Anshan's order, but also due to her concern for Wang Cheng. Given their long acquaintance, Wang Cheng could tell without asking. Therefore, he did not push her off the battleship. In fact, during the last battle at Pingfeng Mountain, Wang Cheng had felt overwhelmed managing multiple functional modules of several battleships on his own. Now, he could let Shubing help him share the pressure by giving her the fire control of the turbine laser cannon, allowing her to fire manually. The turbine laser cannon consumed precious irregular energy crystals, making each shot extremely valuable. Wang Cheng was reluctant to let the ship's somewhat rudimentary intelligent assistance system handle it, while Shubing, with her military background, was well-versed in firearms and weaponry, making her the perfect candidate for the task. Wang Cheng briefly introduced the power of the turbine laser cannon and the preciousness of its ammunition, cautioning Shubing to fire carefully and aim for critical targets. The parameters of the turbine laser cannon left Shubing stunned. She was absolutely certain that in the current military, at least within the region, there was no such level or power of laser cannon. Being from the military herself and having an understanding of these weapons, she deeply realized how incredible and even impossible Wang Cheng's laser cannon was. How could he possess such an advanced weapon? For the current military, this could be considered black technology. Xu Bing's face displayed a mix of emotions. In her surprise, she couldn't help but blurt out what was on her mind. "Wang Cheng, are you really an alien? Or are you like those ancient civilizations of super fungi? Are you even human?" Chapter 172, Killing the Level 6 Mutated Creature. The battleship had ascended to a considerable height, and the central control screen indicated that the ship's thrusters were fully activated. However, Xu Bing's barrage of questions left Wang Cheng momentarily stunned, looking quite taken aback, especially at the question of whether he was human. Wang Cheng felt a bit awkward, and Xu Bing quickly realized her indiscretion. Yet, she was not one to shy away, and these were indeed the answers she wanted to clarify. With no way to take back her words, she looked at Wang Cheng calmly, waiting for his response. Wang Cheng turned his head to look at her, meeting the cold gaze of the awakened female soldier behind him. After a second of silence, he replied, "I am human." There were no further explanations, no additional answers. But looking into his clear black and white eyes, Xu Bing felt he was being truthful. This had always been her judgment of him. In the somewhat dim cockpit, Xu Bing smiled slightly, her frosty expression finally melting away, revealing an indescribable beauty and perfection. She asked one last question. "I don't understand. I'm not your person. I was even sent by Deputy Yi to monitor you. Why do you trust me enough to share these parameters and let me operate this turbo laser cannon?" "Yes, you were sent by Deputy Yi to keep an eye on me, but you didn't withhold the secrets of this battleship from him either. You had many opportunities to do so, yet you kept your promise. Therefore, I believe what you said in the wilderness. I know you as Wang Cheng, and I trust you will honor the commitment between us. So, regardless of any other tasks, I believe that in this moment, on the battlefield against the mutated creatures, you will not be my enemy, and you won't spread anything about this afterward. Of course, that doesn't matter. I have already prepared to confront the military by bringing the battleship here without any reservations. Moreover, we have known each other for quite some time, haven't we? Such a long time is enough for me to decide whether I can trust someone." After saying this, Wang Cheng turned back to control the battleship, accelerating it as they moved forward. Although he had acted recklessly in the Eastern District, he had eliminated those who were indeed causing trouble. Everything Wang Cheng did afterward was relatively standard, and the military did not take any action against him. The two accompanying fighter jets were reduced to one, moving alongside Wang Cheng. The military was in need of capable personnel, and Wang Cheng, along with his battleship, demonstrated considerable combat strength. Engaging in the battlefield was a good choice for the military. Inside the warship, listening to the words from the commander, and feeling the momentary thrust as the vessel moved forward, Xu Bing's expression was somewhat complex. However, she did not continue on the previous topic. She was not someone who was overly sentimental or talkative. The commander's response was sufficient for her. As she familiarized herself with the laser cannon's operating system, she asked the commander some questions regarding certain issues. Yet in her heart, she quietly responded, "You believe in me. I will not let your trust down." At the top of the warship, The turbine laser cannon slowly extended out. Although the commander intended to confront the 6th-level mutated creature, he did not rush directly towards the terrifying giant, but instead flew low, sweeping across the edge of the battlefield in the Western District. The machine guns and missiles roared in unison, killing and injuring a large number of frenzied mutated beings on the ground. This warmed them up and also provided Xu Bing the chance to get accustomed to the turbine laser cannon. Xu Bing attempted to fire. The turbine laser cannon suddenly shot out a beam of laser, piercing through a massive 3rd-level mutated human creature on the ground. The enormous monster, which had been suppressing an infantry squad under the firepower of a military armored vehicle and a group of mutated beings, was struck by this laser beam from above, directly penetrating the creature. Its massive body was instantly obliterated, and the fat within it bubbled violently as it crashed to the ground. The power of the turbine laser cannon deeply astonished Xu Bing. It was a precise annihilation, practically unstoppable. It was indeed a battlefield weapon. However, she remembered the commander's warning that the turbine laser cannon consumed a lot of energy, and aside from test firing, she did not shoot easily. She was very clear about their target, the 6th-level mutated giant turtle that was wreaking havoc on the survivor base in Fengtian. When Xu Bing fired, the commander noticed and was surprisingly aware that he seemed to also receive energy points, though the amount appeared to be small. What was going on? Previously, when he upgraded the high-tech handguns for Su Xinghai and others, they had used them without him receiving any energy points. Could it be because Xu Bing was on his warship? The commander did not have time to think too much about it. He had to focus on the changing situation on the battlefield. At this moment, the commander's warship was swiftly ascending, like a large black bird, moving forward at high speed in the sky. He had completed his warm-up and was ready to hunt down the 6th-level mutated creature. At this moment, the western district of the Fengtian survivor base had already turned into a battlefield of death, filled with monsters and soldiers engaged in fierce combat. Even in the sky, warships and mutated beings were flying about. As the commander ascended, a brown-gray mutated bird, about the size of a car, swooped towards him, but before it could get close, it was shot down by one of the commander's missiles, exploding into a blazing fireball. The commander's warship flew past the flames, and in the blink of an eye, it was already approaching the 6th-level mutated giant turtle. As they got closer, the giant turtle's complete form appeared in the commander's view. It is surrounded by the military's ground and air forces, unleashing a frenzied barrage. Its massive body roars with fury, charging left and right, and with each impact, buildings in the western district collapse like paper in the tremors of the earth. Even armored vehicles and tanks appear fragile against its unparalleled terrifying weight. A heavily armored tank can be easily crushed beneath its enormous claws, while it roars defiantly, blood gushing from its wounded head like a high-pressure water jet shooting up into the sky. Fighter jets, caught off guard, are directly hit and set ablaze. Its eyes have been blinded by military strikes, howling in agony and rage. Yet the repeated bombardment struggles to inflict significant damage. Although its shell is riddled with scars, it is simply too thick. Fatal blows aimed at its exposed head and limbs cause it to instinctively retract. As the royal city approaches, it witnesses the scene. The military has deployed a rocket launcher positioned atop a swaying residential building, trying to maintain altitude while firing at the exposed head of the mutated giant turtle. A barrage of rockets rains down like shooting stars, enough to turn its head into mush, but only one hits before it quickly retracts its head and withdraws into its shell. The concentrated artillery strikes hit its hard shell, causing some structural damage, but in comparison to its massive size, it is merely a drop in the bucket. Meanwhile, the military's ground infantry and armored units press forward, with groups of awakened warriors attempting to breach the shell and detonate the bombs they carry inside. However, at that moment, the mutated giant turtle's head and limbs suddenly lunge out, instantly biting several warriors to death, while its enormous arms swat away the rocket launcher and the building it stands on, turning them into a cloud of dust. The royal city's warship swoops past, and it immediately releases a concentrated bomb drop. Following the command, the laser cannon fires up. Yet, none of this matters. Its shell is too thick, and its size too great. The conventional weapons of the royal city struggle to penetrate. The laser cannon, capable of taking down level 3 mutated creatures, is insignificant against this monster's size. Even if it penetrates, it is akin to a human merely scratching their finger. It's just too massive. The royal city flies in a circle, devising a bold plan. At this moment, the military is organizing a second charge, missiles paving the way to bombard the mutated giant turtle's head, forcing it to retract once more. On the ground, the suicide squad charges forward, but suddenly, they are startled by a terrifying roar overhead. A black aircraft zooms past them, diving straight into the massive mouth of the turtle shell exposed by the retracted head. The suicide squad's advance is too slow, so the royal city pilot flies directly into the turtle shell. If the shell can't be penetrated, he will enter it. The fighter pilots accompanying him are left in shock. Such actions are not unfamiliar to them. There is blood-soaked evidence proving that this is a suicidal move. Their aircraft may seem tough, but compared to this mutated giant turtle, they are nothing. Once they charge in, before they can even open fire, they will be torn apart and crushed by the giant turtle inside, with no chance of survival. This is seeking death. In the command center, Yi Anshan was also monitoring Wang Cheng's movements. However, he did not expect Wang Cheng to make such reckless flying maneuvers. A sudden sense of dread filled him. His judgment was similar to that of the pilots on the battlefield, both believing Wang Cheng was doomed. Yi Anshan felt a twinge of regret, wishing he had informed Wang Cheng in advance that this method was unfeasible. In reality, even if he had tried to notify him, it would have been too late. The battlefield situation changes rapidly, and Wang Cheng's warship was moving at high speed. By the time they noticed Wang Cheng's actions, it was impossible to intercept him in time. Facing Wang Cheng's daring advance, Xu Bing was also taken aback. However, Wang Cheng's warship was not an ordinary fighter jet. The main screen of the warship displayed a message: main gun fully loaded. Inside the shell of the mutated giant turtle, it was pitch black, but the roar of the main gun illuminated the darkness. In front, within the turtle shell, the mutated giant turtle's shell-less body resembled a twisted mass of flesh, horrifically ugly. Although its eyes had been blinded, it could still sense the intruder's arrival. It howled in rage and thrust its head forward, aiming to tear apart Wang Cheng's warship. What awaited it, however, was a 210mm caliber electromagnetic cannon. Under normal circumstances, given the strength of this monster, even a missile exploding right in front of it would not be a problem. This was also why previous military attempts to bomb the turtle shell with fighter jets had failed. It was just too resilient. Its flesh filled the entire shell, leaving no space for fighter jets to maneuver, resulting in them being trapped and waiting for death. In contrast, smaller humans entering the turtle shell had a better chance of destroying it from within. It seemed to think the same way, believing that the unexpected guest charging in was no different from previous intruders, and it prepared to directly eliminate Wang Cheng. However, waiting for it was the Thunder Fist, the 210mm caliber electromagnetic main gun, which had an exit speed and destructive power far exceeding that of a missile. It struck directly at the center of its head like a heavy punch. The creature let out a tragic howl. Its head, which had just shot out like lightning, retracted in fear and pain, its massive body contracting violently from the agony, blood splattering everywhere. This created an excellent opportunity for Wang Cheng. His warship swung rapidly in the empty space created by the monster's retreat, launching torpedoes and missiles simultaneously. At the same time, Xu Bing, without needing Wang Cheng to remind her, Xu Bing, with her heart racing, reacted with slight dissatisfaction. She maneuvered the turret of the turbo laser cannon, which roared as it turned. The energy beams formed a brilliant line and burst forth. Endless firepower poured out madly. In just 1 second, the concentrated firepower was enough to turn a heavily fortified military fortress into dust. At this moment, however, it was the monster's head that was blown apart. No matter how tough the body, it was still flesh and blood, unable to withstand such fierce firepower. Blood splattered as the dark shell was illuminated by the explosion. The 6th-level mutated creature's body convulsed violently. In Wang Cheng's mind, the system prompt echoed instantly. Dear host, you have successfully killed the current high-energy creature and gained 5,000 energy points. Dear host, the current high-energy creature can extract special serum. Please proceed to extract it as soon as possible. The 6th-level mutated creature was killed by Wang Cheng on the spot. Chapter 173. Who is chasing the 5th-level monster to kill? After upgrading to a 5th-level battleship, Wang Cheng fired all the way through Pingfeng Mountain, consuming a significant amount of energy points, which were already running low. At this moment, with the successful kill of this 6th-level mutated creature, Wang Cheng's energy points skyrocketed directly to 5,000. He had gathered half of the 10,000 energy points required to upgrade to a 6th-level battleship. And the speed of this accumulation made Wang Cheng feel a wave of excitement on the battlefield. If he could take down another one, wouldn't he directly reach the 6th level? Of course, 6th-level mutated creatures are rare and possess formidable strength. If it weren't for the military having encircled and suppressed them for a long time and helping Wang Cheng gain the upper hand, it would have been difficult for him to complete the kill of this 6th-level mutated creature so quickly. Unfortunately, being in the battleship, Wang Cheng didn't have time to disembark and collect the special serum from the 6th-level mutated creature as the situation on the battlefield changed. After the kill, Wang Cheng swiftly turned inside the dimly lit massive shell, the thrusters spewing scorching flames as he sped out. Outside the enormous 6th-level mutated giant turtle, members of the military's suicide squad watched in astonishment as Wang Cheng's battleship soared over their heads. At that moment, a fighter jet that had been flying alongside Wang Cheng approached from the side and flew in formation with him. Wang Cheng glanced over, and the pilot inside the military aircraft gave him a thumbs up with a complex expression. Below them, on the ground, the city lay in ruins, thick smoke billowing. The sixth-level mutated creature was no longer the fierce and powerful beast it had been moments ago. It lay motionless on the ground, flesh slowly oozing from the gap in its massive shell, utterly defeated. Many soldiers and military vehicles were still approaching, concerned it might not be completely dead. Meanwhile, at the command center, this scene had already been relayed in real time, leaving everyone in shock. Seemingly unable to believe that such a terrifying sixth-level mutated creature had been taken down. It was only after a moment that the crowd erupted into cheers like a tsunami. Some officers could hardly hide their astonishment. The commander of the aerial forces quietly remarked to Yi Anshan, "The aircraft that Wang Cheng used has performance superior to our military planes, and it seems to carry an endless supply of firepower. Where did he get so many missiles?" Especially those who had previously doubted Wang Cheng were now nearly speechless, stammering, He really did it. How did he do it? Our top pilots had all failed in their attempts." Regarding these issues, Yi Anshan was also uncertain. He had not anticipated that within less than 20 minutes, this dark aircraft, which had suddenly entered the region, would repeatedly become the focus of everyone in the command center. It maneuvered across the battlefield, surveying all around, and even managed to kill a sixth-level mutated creature. It's worth noting that leaving Wang Cheng to his own devices, Yi Anshan was both desperate and genuinely unable to manage this external personnel. But who could have imagined that Wang Cheng would actually help them resolve the problem with such a thunderous approach? The command center was in an uproar. At this moment, the comparison results finally came out. According to the direct comparison from Big Data, the technicians reported, Deputy Yi, although this aircraft has significant changes from the two we recorded previously, we can confirm that while they are not the same aircraft, this one is likely an upgraded version of the previously recorded ones, sharing many similarities. However, this aircraft is definitely not the one we recorded at the Su Bei Granary. After the incident at the Su Bei Granary, the military at the survivor base had been searching for the aircraft that had killed a fifth-level mutated creature. And now the comparison results had finally emerged. Indeed, Yi Anshan's gaze was fixed on the real-time footage. So, does this mean that besides this aircraft, there are others of the same origin? They clearly could not have imagined that it was the same aircraft, even if it was an upgraded version. In such a short time, they naturally assumed it should be two different aircraft. Reaching this conclusion meant that a hint of caution appeared in Yi Anshan's eyes as he looked at the dark aircraft soaring in the footage. Now filled with complexity and scrutiny, he suddenly realized that he might have underestimated or misjudged Wang Cheng. This seemingly ordinary young man, judging by his resume, was far more than just a survivor from High City. Wang Cheng was certainly not simple. Yi Anshan slowly set aside the report, temporarily deciding not to make it public. However, on the battlefield, Wang Cheng's warship was swiftly darting through the sky. He earned respect through his strength, and wherever the warship passed, the ground forces erupted in thunderous cheers. They did not know where Wang Cheng's aircraft had come from, but they knew he had successfully slain a sixth-level mutated creature, hence the cheers. With the death of the sixth-level mutated creature, the greatest danger on the western battlefield was eliminated, and the situation was about to turn around. However, the collapse of the sixth-level mutated creature did not end Wang Cheng's objectives. His warship soared through the sky, speeding from the western region and launching missiles to attack a fifth-level mutated creature at a gap in the city defenses. This time, the time taken for the survivor base of the region to be breached was significantly longer than before. The entire encirclement of monsters was stirred up, and many fifth-level mutated creatures lingering at the edge of the survivor base flocked towards it, even as the military desperately attempted to hold them back. Several fifth-level mutated creatures had either entered the western region or were lingering at the breach. Wang Cheng has tasted success and has lost interest in the countless small mutated creatures on the ground, directing his warship straight towards the level 5 mutated beings. The energy points that level 5 mutated creatures can provide range from 1,000 to 2,000, which, while far less than what a level 6 mutated creature can offer, is still considerable. If he can take down several of them, Wang Cheng even hopes to accumulate 10,000 energy points in today's battle. Although the energy points required for upgrading the warship increase with each upgrade, the warship's strength also rises accordingly, making it easier to obtain energy points than before. Thus, the pressure is not overwhelming. With so many level 5 creatures gathered and the military's heavy firepower and support, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In Wang Cheng's eyes, these level 5 mutated beings, seen as a significant threat to the safety of the survivors' base by the military and high command, are merely moving energy points. His warship swiftly cuts through the battlefield, roaring as it spews flames of death. The main cannon charges and fires, striking a severely wounded level 5 mutated creature that is desperately struggling under the military's assault. The heavy and powerful shell explodes its head, and terrifyingly, the creature does not die. its body rise as a massive tail rises behind it, and from within, another large head begins to grow. But this is futile. Waiting for it is a heavy, high-explosive torpedo. A bright explosion lights up the sky as Wang Cheng and the accompanying military aircraft open fire, cutting through the flames. While behind them, the Level 5 giant collapses. Wang Cheng speeds towards the next Level 5 mutated creature. Only a system notification echoes in Wang Cheng's mind. Dear host, you have successfully killed the current high-energy creature, gaining 1,200 energy points. Dear host, the current high-energy creature can yield a special serum. Please proceed to extract it as soon as